Okay, welcome and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I know we have people from all over the world here, and in order to get this kicked off, we want to welcome you all here. I'm just going to briefly introduce to you Kaishal Dalal, who's going to chant the Namokar mantra for us, and just tell you briefly that we really have at the seat of this a phone call, this event, a phone call or a Zoom call, I should say, with Hope Bohanec, who called me while we were offering different courses from the Jain Vegan Initiative, from Compassionate Living on Arihanta Institute. We've been collaborating for a while, and Hope said, hey, why don't we do a conference about Jain veganism or something about the contributions of Jain philosophy to Jain veganism? And we immediately said, yes, this is a great idea. We called up Jain Vegan Initiative, and then the next thing you know, we had a full schedule of speakers who were going to participate in this. One of the people who was really impactful and joined our team was Kaishal Dalal, and Kaishal is on stage with us today. Kaishal is a member of the Ahimsa Vegan Committee of Jaina. He is a CPA and now retired. He has been vegan since 2009 and actively working for animal advocacy. In the past, he served as a treasurer for many years at the Jain Center of Northern California, and currently he is a member of JCNC's Board Finance Committee. Kaishal has been so instrumental in helping us really promote this message of veganism with Jaina and other organizations, and we're really grateful to you, Kaishal. I'd like to invite you to the stage to chant for us to begin this conference, the Namokar mantra.
Thanks, Grace. Om Namo Arihantanam. Om Namo Siddhanam. Om Namo Ayariyanam. Om Namo Uvajayanam. Namo Loe Savasahunam. Namo Loe Savasahunam. Eso Panchanamukaro Stauva Pava Panasano Mangalanancha Sauve Sing Paramang Havai Mangalam Paramang Havai Mangalam.
Jai Janendra, thank you, Kaishal, for doing that, and thank you for all your support for this event, as well as at Jaina and the Jaina Ahimsa Vegan Committee. You've all been such an integral part of this project. I would also like to take a moment to thank our collaborators at the Jain Vegan Initiative, and in particular, we had 3 members very involved, Nisha Mehta, Pratik Bansali, you've seen them throughout the event, as well as Sunny Jain, who will be speaking later today. We also want to thank Gina Shah, who also joined the committee as the former head of the Ahimsa Vegan Committee and was instrumental in the organization. And of course, my colleague, Hope Bohanec, who's given so much to this project. Thank you all, and thank you to everyone who behind the scenes, including at the Earth and One helped us, Ruchika Chitrabhanu, who you'll hear from today, as well as Mamta Valderrama from the Mercy for Animals. We've really had such a collaboration, wonderful collaboration in bringing this conference to you. Now, we're going to start in just a couple minutes with our first speakers. There's a couple things I wanted to announce to you all that you are probably interested in. A lot of people are asking questions about this yesterday. The first is that the recordings will be available shortly after the conference. We'll get them up on the conference website for you, so you can watch one at a time, or you can watch the whole conference. You can share their website with your friends. We will also be sending out a post-conference survey to you to get your opinion on your experience of this conference, and tell us what you got out of it. We've already received messages from members of the Jain community saying that from the first day they've been transformed. They want to become vegan. I saw one message from Nirva yesterday, for example, from someone, and this is really powerful, because that's why we're here. We're trying to give people the opportunity to have this transformative experience and to really take all this information in. So we will send you a survey about this, And we will also be posting from time to time throughout the rest of the conference today in the chat several links where you can reach us, including an email address if you have questions, a link to the website, the conference website, if you want to see the recordings, as well as our social media handles if you want to get in touch. Another interesting resource that we think is important is that some people have been asking us, hey, I'm Jain, or even not Jain, I want to go vegan. What do I do? What do I replace this or that with in my recipes? I use ghee or I use yogurt. What can I do? And these are really good questions, especially for people who are just starting to go vegan. And the Jain Vegan Initiative luckily has a link tree that I'm also going to share in the chat with you all. And this is going to give you many resources, including 2 cookbooks, one of which is for Paryushan specifically, a Paryushan inspired cookbook that you can use for the Paryushan celebrations this year, as well as another cookbook by Pramodaben Chitrbanu that will also be a great resource for you if you want to just make some general recipes and find some inspiration for how you can cook really good vegan food. So with that being said, I'm now going to just transition into the first panel today. And heading up this panel and presiding over this panel is Dr. Gina Shah, who is the past chair of the Ahimsa Eco-Vegan Committee of Jaina and a climate realities leader. She is board certified in general preventative medicine and in family medicine with experience in global public health, drug development, lifestyle medicine, and bioethics. She decided to go vegan more than 30 years ago for Ahimsa, and with her professional experience, she has come to appreciate and teach the health benefits of a whole foods, plant-based diet. She contributes to the blog veganjains.com. That's another website we can provide for you, and authored the Jain contribution to the Interfaith Vegan Coalition Kit. So without further delay, I will invite Dr. Gina Shah to preside over the next panel. Thank you, Gina.
Thank you. So the panel that we're going to be launching is the interconnectedness of human, animal, and planetary health. And I hope you'll see in this series of presentations, starting with Asha Gala of Ethos Primary Care. She's the Lifestyle Clinical Director, followed by Dr. Tushar Mehta. And then the last presentation in the series will be myself. I hope you'll see the evolution of a story. So I'll without further hinting about what's going to be covered, I'm just going to go ahead and introduce Asha Gala and then have her start her presentation. So Asha Gala, I met in New Jersey about a year ago at Ethos Primary Care. And I already found in her a kindred spirit. She is the Lifestyle Clinical Director at Ethos Primary Care, a medical practice in New Jersey, first of its kind. She's certified by the National Board of Health and Wellness as a lifestyle coach and approved by Brown University's Mindfulness Center as a mindfulness-based stress reduction teacher, MBSR. Over the past decade, she's worked in this capacity as a lifestyle coach in New Jersey, and she puts these skills to use by supporting Ethos patients day in and day out in their healing journey, from designing and teaching lifestyle classes to facilitating support groups for patients healing from chronic illness to providing one-on-one lifestyle coaching sessions. Asha offers professional support and personal understanding. She's excited to ease the path of all who are on the wellness journey, gently and compassionately helping put into practice everything she's learned over her decades of study and experimentation. Her partnership with Dr. Weiss, who founded the practice in designing yearly regenerative human health and wellness programs and applying them, has helped many in successfully losing over 50 pounds of weight, getting off of medications, and or reversing chronic illness. Outside her busy work life, she enjoys spending time with her grandchildren. She incorporates not only whole foods plant-based diet, but also dance, meditation, music, and hiking as 2 tools for healthy and harmonious living. So thank you, Asha, for presenting. Please go ahead with your presentation.
Wow, thank you. So I'm all excited. So here I can start off with sharing my screen. Here we go. All right. Good morning to all of you. And I think pretty soon it'll be, actually it's good afternoon for us. So wherever you are, hopefully it's a great, it's a great start. So I would like to start, I'm a sister, I'm an aunt, I'm a wife, a mother, and of course, a great, proud grandma. I'm blessed to get an opportunity to be a lifestyle coach at Ethos Primary Care, as Gina mentioned. I also am a board member of Ethos Farm Project, which is, his mission is to address the interconnectedness of agriculture that affects human health, planetary health, and our relations. So I'm really looking forward to presenting the topic, the paradox of dairy consumption in Jain community. I want to kick off with one of my fondest memories of my childhood was I was 9 years old. It was Pajushant time. And when, if you don't know, most of the Jains, they take vows, austerities during this time. They study, and there's a lot of fasting involved. So I had chosen to do, a 9-year-old at that time, to do iktana, eating just one time a day. And guess what? I was all very excited because my mom said that she was going to pick up Shrikand. If you don't know, it's made from animal milk yogurt and sugar. Although that Shrikand story is a fond memory, I now look back at that memory with a very different perspective. Looking back, I also remember my disconnection of opening that door for the milkman with my utensils ready with the milk coupon. And this was a normal ritual in my home. Every morning and afternoon, fresh animal milk would be delivered. I did not make any connection of the milk and how it was produced or where it came from. So what I did was, all of these thoughts came to me when Gina approached me to do this. So I ended up thinking I wanted to prepare for my topic. And I chose to do a survey among my Jain friends and family about their views on dairy products. And I want to mention that the survey was not done in a control setting, and therefore it can be biased. I'm just using it as an introduction to begin understanding why Jains consume dairy. I'm very grateful to the 99 people who filled the survey. It really helped me to share my views of the following questions I wanted to discuss on the paradox of dairy consumption in Jain community. The survey had a format of a true or false or yes and no questions. My presentation will flow with these following questions that you see on the screen. Why do Jains consume dairy products? Or what are the benefits for Jains in giving up dairy? And lastly, I want to kind of touch base on how to change. So the next few slides, I will be discussing the survey results to share my answers to the question, why do Jains consume dairy products? The answer true or yes will be in blue, and the answers false or no will be in red. So let's kick off with this one. With a true or false option to the question, this was a question, dairy products are vital for human health and wellness. About 60% expressed that it was true. I remember most of my teen through young adult life, I had very similar opinion like these 60% that I needed dairy products for my health and wellness. I was very convinced with that. Continuing with the survey question, the question was, I do not harm animals when eating dairy products. Again, there was a yes and no option. Along with the 54% of the survey people, I too was of the mindset, hey, I'm not harming animals when I enjoyed my Shrikand. I was simply taking care of my health. Come on. And I was getting my protein. I was getting my calcium. Those were the thought process at that time. The true or false survey question on dairy foods are a part of traditional Jain diet brought to my attention how along as you see on the screen, 70% of the participants agree that it is liberally used. I was raised with dairy products being a part of my daily meal choices. I saw dairy products used for many rituals at temples. 80% of the survey participants expressed yes to this question. I enjoy the taste of dairy products. Casein is present in all dairy products and can make dairy products quite addictive. I enjoy dairy products until I came across this connection that there can be an addictive relationship. And this was a huge eye-opener for me, and that's how my journey just started. I started exploring more and more. The next survey question that I had asked our survey people was, the question was, I eat dairy products out of social pressure. We see here, as you see on the slide, 81% admitted the social pressure they feel of consuming dairy. Like these 81%, I too struggled for many years tremendously with this. As a newbie, learning the drawbacks of dairy products was shocking. I was considered as an extreme. The word moderation was very loosely used to explain my extremism. Today, I'm filled with empathy and compassion to this journey. And if you want to know, my journey started in 1995. That was when me and my family started going in the direction of giving up dairy products. So I wanted to summarize my views. These are my views of why do Jains consume dairy products. Many feel that they are vital for their health and wellness. There is a disconnection of how dairy products are produced. Traditionally, it's in a Jain diet. We enjoy the taste and, of course, the social pressure. Having gained some understanding the reason why my Jain friends and family consume dairy, it's just sparked to share the following benefits of giving up dairy. I said, let me at least present it here, what will be the benefits. So I will continue to share my survey with the results of these 99 people. So about 83% expressed yes to the survey question, all animal milk is for their babies. So benefit of giving up dairy will stop Jains from taking that does not belong to them. About 77% answered false to the question. Milking a mother animal is comfortable. I have breastfed my 2 children and have suffered with pain, of course, but happily did it for my children. Not sure if I would do it as an ongoing part of my life to provide for others. Again, if we give up dairy, we will be reducing, Jains will be reducing a lot of suffering. About 76% shared false to the survey question. There is no direct or indirect in animal milk production. Boy, this result was a big joy. I was really excited that the large population of my participants have compassion to understand this. So benefits of giving up dairy will reduce violence. To the survey question, dairy products have a harmful impact on our environment. Just 54% agreed on this. So benefits of giving up dairy will reverse the drawbacks its productions have to our environment. Dr. Tushar Mehta will be mentioning a lot more than me. He's an expert probably in sharing more after I present. So I look forward to hearing from you. So as I wanted to summarize about my views, what are the benefits that Jains will have in giving up dairy products? Number one, they will be stopping something, drinking, or using it in their meals that doesn't belong to them. They'll be reducing suffering. They'll be reducing the indirect and direct violence. And sure enough, they'll halt the harmful impact of our environment. Having personal experience and helping many at Ethos, the patients, it has strengthened my skills in addressing this one daunting feeling that everybody has. Oh, what am I going to do if I give up dairy? So I'm going to touch a little bit on that, this feeling daunting feeling. All right, 100% answered yes to the survey question. What was it? The question was, I am aware that avoiding violence or harm to all living beings is an important Jain value. So all my survey participants were very much aware that an important Jain value is avoiding violence. Jain community is blessed with this amazing teachings. I would say, let's blow our horns. The seed is already sown. It should not be as hard. This survey results was discussed earlier, a yes and a no question. Dairy products have a harmful impact on our environment. So let's explore on how 46% who chose to say no, that it does not. Let's connect to why do they feel that way? Why do they not connect it? My views are by education and discussions as presented over this whole weekend and conferences like this, we can definitely bring about the change and the shift. As a child, I remember it was very much drilled into me, the importance of dairy. Similarly, I think if we can find ways to educate the caregivers of children, the young parents, the grandparents on the harmful impact dairy has on environment, this is definitely going to generate a ripple effect. We reviewed this survey question earlier again. I enjoy the taste of dairy products, and guess what? 80% admitted yes. I am of the view that the 80% of the survey participants have been hijacked by casein that is present in all dairy products. Casein can trigger the brain's opioid receptors, and it's linked to addiction, as I mentioned earlier. How can we address this hijack? I encourage our participants to look with institutes like, like a medical practice like Ethos, which is unique. We really work very hard. There are many like that we could go to. Again, I wanted to mention that at Ethos, as a lifestyle coach, I see our patients addressing this hijack day in, day out. It's not easy, but they are admitting it. They feel trapped in it. And when they are, especially when they're addressing chronic health issues, high blood pressure, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, hormones, autoimmune, osteoporosis, many of these chronic illnesses. I wanted to share, it was a joy for me to share one of our 80-year-old, and I want to emphasize this 80-year-old patient who came to us, he had 4 mini strokes. And he took up the ownership in making the lifestyle change to reach his health and wellness goals in celebrating his upcoming 80th birthday. And guess what he said? He told our practice that he wants to bicycle 80 kilometers in 80 days. So one of the lifestyle changes that he made was giving up all dairy products. He took the time, spent time in educating himself, understanding what were the causes of his stroke, and with trial and error, figuring out his new palate. That's the key. He came up with a new palate that did not have any dairy in it. Ignorance is bliss. I was there. We visited this survey question. Dairy products are vital for human health and wellness. The 60% who answered this as true, that dairy product is vital for their health and wellness. I would like to share my views that it's a myth that we need dairy for our health. Dr. Gina Shah, she will dive deeper into the subject later. I work with Dr. Weiss's patients in strengthening their food choices to be mainly vegetable, fruits, beans, lentils, whole grains, starchy vegetables, nuts, and seeds. We discuss with these patients, sometimes we do have to discuss some key vitamins like B12 or D. Me and my husband, we enjoy our yogurt from unsweetened soy milk. We enjoy making moong dal halwa, a sweet dish. It is made dairy-free. It's made with lentils. And without adding any sugar, oil, or salt to it. I do not yearn for the Shrikand. The memory is fond. but with time, my taste buds have adapted to the new taste. The hows to make the change is switching just one recipe at a time. Master that recipe with a plant-based dairy substitute or a bean, bringing awareness to your taste and desires. Continue to educate on dairy product and reflect, and I really say reflect on what values you see in the dairy products. And I think a lot of answers will come up because you will be motivated to look for those answers. I would like each one of you to reflect on the story of cigarettes. It took more than 100 years of research, discussion, debate to reach our current knowledge of the risks cigarettes have on our health. Similarly, I'm hoping that many can benefit from the knowledge gained. This weekend is amazing. Many conferences that we have had in past and will be having in future. Jain community has a golden opportunity to become proactive and in bringing, unveiling the truth about dairy and its connection to our health. Curiosity is the king, yes. It will ignite in many Jain followers to rethink on their dairy choices. As I heard Chris mentioning earlier, how yesterday's talk brought many questions. So I'm very looking forward. Having a beginner's mind, that's it. That's all you need. Just bring that, and then you'll see the changes that you'll be able to bring about. The survey question, I had asked this survey question, and it was about the dietary choices, my dietary choices, and I had given 4 options for my surveyors to pick: vegan, lacto-vegetarian, lacto-ovo-vegetarian, and omnivore. And as you see, 72% admitted that they were lacto-vegetarian, consuming dairy. My hope is that with the correct knowledge and guidance from leaders in the field of health and wellness, environment and ethics, I see that there will be a shift. Summarizing my views on the how to change and give up dairy, reflect on Jain values, right? Bring that first. Spending time in education on harmful impacts to the environment. That is the key. I know many times I come across patients, they'll be like, I should just tell me what to do. Then find somebody that you can trust. If you don't want to take the trouble, then find some institutes, that will guide you, or coaches or doctors, or, whichever path you end up choosing. But you would need to spend time. Open to changing your palate. That is number one. Modify one recipe. If you're trying to make a recipe and you're trying to kind of replicate, that was my initial 10 years, is trying to replicate recipes. Rather opening up this palate and changing and not looking at back and just moving forward and seeing these new tastes that will come up. So open up your palate. Building clarity on myths. Especially there are so many myths around dairy products. Continue to build that clarity. And I always encourage you to look within your family, especially all the health issues, and try to find out what's the root cause of those, And so I wanted to kind of, with my last ending my presentation, with the help of the survey, I was able to identify some key understanding many of the Jain family and friends had. I have lived through being ignorant. Absolutely, I was ignorant. But with correct knowledge, I was able to make the shift needed at the own pace. Me and my family struggled. I would definitely say that. When we bring about mindfulness into our daily routine, we become curious, right? That's what we need. That's the recipe. And that will support the individuals to change. I am very grateful to all of you as well, all who made it possible for me to share my views. I wish you all well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Asha. It was a wonderful blend of the survey results and reflections on them, and really appreciate your taking the time to prepare and deliver this excellent presentation. And next in our lineup is a friend, Dr. Tushar Mehta, who I have known for many, many years since we've been attending Jaina and YJP and YJA. And, you know, we've had interchange in the North American Jain community for what seems like most of our young adult lives. Dr. Tushar Mehta is an emergency medicine physician practicing in the Toronto area. And as well, both of us volunteered in the Bidra Kutch child health camp some years ago. So he also has experience in international health, and including both India and in Haiti. He's worked with other non-governmental organizations, including Sea Shepherds, Operation Zero Tolerance. He's given many lectures and seminars, including at Jaina, YJA, local Jain events, and non-Jain events as well. Along with the team, he is co-founder of Towards Ahimsa and has volunteered with Jain and secular youth camps, promoting Ahimsa philosophy and modernity, emphasizing the interconnectedness of humans, animals, and all life. And with a small team, Dr. Mehta co-founded Plant-Based Data, a free database which organizes academic and institutional literature regarding plant-based diet, health, environment, food security, and zoonotic pandemic risk. He's a frequent lecturer, and we're happy to have him joining us here. Take it away, Tushar.
Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. So amazing to see all these incredible people speaking, and I love the presentation, Asha, and so many of you yesterday, and so many people that I've worked with, like Gina and others, are in this group here so far. So a little bit about me. I think Gina touched on some of the main things. I'm also on the board of directors of an organization called A Well-Fed World, and I'd love for you to check it out, as well as hephaiti.com. That's where our projects are in Haiti, and Plant-Based Data, of course. This is the big one. So what I want to do is, I think there's a lot of people here who may already be vegan or are very interested. And what I want us to be is better educated about a lot of the important facts around plant-based diets and veganism, and how to be better advocates as well. This will touch on some of the things that Asha was speaking of right now, like, the idea that is dairy necessary for our health, or does dairy hurt the environment, or does it hurt animals, which a lot of people don't know about or have very biased or limited views, right? And how do we replace? Okay, so now the first thing I'm going to get into is, how do you convince people that there is no such thing as humane milk? Because most of the people I speak with in India, they really think that no, the cows are taken care of really, really well. And we have these discussions over and over. And so I devised sort of a way of explaining to them that it's not possible to have humane milk. So, oops, here we go. So India is oh my God, what's going on here? Why is okay. India is the #1 exporter of beef in the world. And why is this? And India has more than 300 million heads of cattle in the world. Sometimes I'm pressing a button and it's changing more than one slide at a time. Unfortunately, I'm not sure why that is. Now, let's look at some facts. In India, a cow can live, the lifespan of a cow can be about 20 years. Cow produces dairy milk only after the delivery of a calf. And a lot of people don't know this. They don't realize it. Milk production starts high, but gets lower after 6 to 8 months. And cows are bred to be able to become pregnant 3 months after lactating. So they can basically have a baby every 12 months. So if we do some math on this, let's pretend there is a farmer who has 10 cows and is starting a dairy business, okay? So the first thing that this farmer's got to do is get all those cows pregnant, and they all got to have a baby. On average, you're going to have 5 girls and 5 boys, right? And so you're going to have milk production at that time. Your population has gone from 10 to 20. Now, you're going to do it again the next year, and you're going to have a population of 30. This is your second year in business, and you're producing milk, but you have 30 almost now. And you do the same thing again. You make those moms pregnant again, 3rd year in a row, and you have milk production for 3 years going now. Now, the cattle were actually old enough. The babies were old. The first set of babies were old enough a couple of years ago to become pregnant. Now, we've just delayed it a year for convenience, okay? So conservatively, in your 4th year, your 3rd year, you're going to make some of those babies pregnant, the baby girls. Those are the ones, the capital X are the girls, okay? And they are pregnancy age, so now they're a mom. And now you have 55, okay? You have 15 births that year. The following year, you have 20 births, and you have 75. And the following year, you're going to have another 25 births. You've gone to a population of 100. That's in year 6, okay? But there's 5 years of dairy production. Now, let's see. You've gone through 6 cycles. It can actually be less than this because you can make the babies pregnant earlier. And you've got 90 babies, all right? 45 of the babies are male. Now, they are pretty much automatically useless in India, okay? People do not use cattle or bulls for farming anymore. Across the vast majority of India, they do not do this, okay? Even the poor farmers use mechanization and human labor. So they're pretty much useless, and most of them are killed off in one way or another. There's different ways that they are sold for meat production domestically, secretly. Even in areas like Gujarat, they're sold as bakra meat and just in the black market, very cheap. And they're killed in other ways too. Now, the farmer only has capacity, let's say, for 30 animals on the land that he has. So that means he's got to get rid of some females as well. So probably he's going to get rid of the original moms or some of the, and a lot of the babies as well. The baby females will also be discarded, okay? Now, India has more than 300 million cattle. That means buffaloes and cows. There's actually more buffaloes. More than 70% are female at any given time because of the greater killing of the males. And approximately, now this is very conservative, approximately every 2 years, you're going to have about 300 million births, okay, or more, okay? And so that means, you're going to go from 300 million to 600 million in a couple of years. But there's not enough land, food, and water to feed an extra 300 million cattle, all right? India has already cut 80% of its forests for animal grazing, farmings, and other purposes, okay? Even if you cut down the remaining 20%, we're not going to be able to feed those extra animals. Cattle use a lot of water for their feed and also drinking water, okay? We don't have enough. Now, the Panjapurs, on the high side, may have 3 million cattle, okay? But these cattle are not cycled every year. They're just staying there mostly for a long time, right? So they're mostly full. You're not going to accommodate a lot of new cattle. So if you think that you produce baby cattle and you're putting them in Panjapurs, guess what? Less than 1% of the total baby cattle that are born are going to make it to a Panjapur, okay? And India has the largest demand for dairy pretty much in the world, okay? And therefore, we have the highest beef export, because if you're having 300 million born every couple of years and going from 300 million to 600 million, and then conceivably to 900 million or a billion animals, a couple of years later, you can't do it. So this is the way that I explain to people that it is impossible. Now, I have a YouTube video about this, and you can use that as a tool to convince our vegetarian family friends who are Indian, Jain, whatever, why the system necessarily results in killing. And these humane dairies are a myth. All of these humane dairies, they end up having the same problem as this farmer did, okay? And they end up changing the practices, giving away their cattle, the babies to whatever. They end up doing that stuff or closing down. Now, what are the ecological impacts of dairy? That's the next thing. So to understand the ecological impacts, we have to understand a concept called a feed conversion ratio, okay? Now, we can look at this in terms of protein. We can look at this in terms of calories. I'm going to stick with protein. An animal converts protein by eating protein, then puts it into their bodily functions, into their flesh, into their enzymes, into energy generation. And in the case of chickens, they will, put some of that protein towards eggs. In terms of lactating cows, they'll put some of the protein they consume into the dairy that they're going to produce, the milk. Now, basically, at its most efficient, okay, in the most efficient situations, it takes about 100 grams of plant protein consumed by the mommy cow to produce 25 grams of dairy protein that will come out in the milk. So you have an inefficiency there. It's only 25% efficient. And therefore, you have to grow lots more protein and energy to feed the mom compared to what comes out into the dairy, okay? So it's going to take more land. It's going to take more water to feed an animal to produce milk as compared to directly consuming that protein that is grown on the land, especially if you're growing an efficient protein. And the most efficient protein is actually soy. And that's what the majority of feed is for dairy cows in lots of the developed parts of the world, where they are the most efficient. That's where you're getting the most efficiency, okay? So it's going to take more land and water. Now, this graphic comes from a study that looks at lots of different animal products. But let's look at the land. Per 100 grams of protein, it takes about 5 to 10 times as much land to get dairy protein compared to soy protein. I'm using soy as the comparison over here, okay? And it can even be worse than that, okay? So you're using more land. It takes more water, maybe 10 to 20 times as much water as compared to producing the same amount of protein through soy. Now, tofu is the comparison here, but tofu is produced from soy milk, and you actually have, and soy milk is actually more efficient than tofu itself, okay? So that's how much extra water you're using. And in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, it takes about 5 times as much warming is produced, mostly through methane that is emitted from the cattle, compared to producing soy milk. And again, these are the sort of the better numbers for the dairy protein. It could be much worse. The animals can be much less efficient and produce much more methane compared to that. So that's on the best side. Now, all of these animal products lead, therefore, to more use of land, more deforestation. It's, animal agriculture is the #1 cause of deforestation worldwide. More freshwater loss, eutrophication, meaning pollution into water that's marine, like seawater, as well as freshwater, climate change. And these things combine to cause biodiversity loss, the killing of plants, animals, ecosystems around the world. Okay, there's massive biodiversity loss. So that's what happens. Next, let's talk about the health impacts. Okay, so very basically, so I think there's some nuance here. Basically, is dairy healthy or not? Now, whenever we ask if something is healthy, we have to say compared to what? Okay, all of the scientific studies compare something. They compare people that say consuming dairy or some other animal product to other things that the person may be consuming instead. So this depends on various factors. For example, what food are you comparing the dairy to? Are you comparing dairy to potato chips, to soy milk, or to other plant-based milks? Are you comparing now? And what is the context of the person? Are you a rich person or a poor person? Where do you live? What kind of food do you eat? What is your baseline protein, B12, and calcium consumption? All right. So if somebody's a poor person in, let's say, India, who doesn't eat that much and is not getting enough food, dairy could be a very, very important food for them. That may constitute 30% of their protein, and it may constitute 100% of your B12, especially if you're a vegetarian in a place like India. That may be your only source of B12. It also depends on what kind of dairy you're consuming. Is it full fat or skim milk and things like that? So those things have health implications too, all right? So overall, what we need to do is we need to think of what is the best replacement for dairy. I don't say to people that you just have to stop consuming milk. You have to stop consuming milk. We want to do that for our health, but we have to find out what the best thing is to consume instead of milk, okay? And we'll get into that a little bit more, okay? Now, the health effects of dairy. If you're comparing dairy to fortified soy milk, okay? So fortified soy milk means that it's got protein that's the same amount as dairy milk does, plus it has B12 and calcium to the same amount or perhaps more than dairy milk would have, okay? In that case, you could say that dairy, as compared to fortified soy milk or other diets that have B12, protein, calcium adequately supplied, that dairy would cause increase of all-cause mortality. That means increased death rates in general, okay, to a certain percentage. It would cause increased breast cancer, prostate cancer, okay? Sorry, I have all-cause mortality twice there, error in my slide. It would cause more diabetes for sure, cardiovascular disease, and also there's some evidence for dementia. Now, I've listed a few articles down there, and my slides can be shared, and you can find this information on plant-based data as well. And full-fat dairy, sorry for a spelling mistake there, full-fat dairy is the worst, okay? It's worse than skim milk, all right, in terms of its health impacts, right? Now, for our health, remember, if you are being plant-based, including vegetarian or people who don't eat much animal products, especially vegans, okay, we need to make sure we are getting our B12. It's especially important if somebody is lactating, pregnant, or pediatric. people over 50 on certain medications, certain gastrointestinal conditions will lead people to have lower B12s, okay, and B12 levels. And some people are low, despite not having any of these risk factors, they are still low anyway. So people need to pay attention to B12, and a lot of people who are not plant-based still need to supplement B12, okay? But especially us plant-based, and 100% if you're vegans. That's the one thing we have to be the most careful about, all right? Now, the health benefits of soy, all right? There's a lot of misinformation around soy. And I think that so much of the challenge is around misinformation. So the health effects of soy is that compared to dairy, we would have less mortality. We would have less prostate cancer and breast cancer. I should have put breast cancer, lower breast cancer there, and lower cholesterol and stronger bones. There's good evidence in these health parameters by soy milk. And people think, oh, you can't take soy milk because it might increase breast cancer. In fact, it's exactly the opposite. The research shows it's protective from breast cancer. And also, if somebody has had breast cancer, there's some evidence that it protects you from recurrence of breast cancer. Now, it's not a slam dunk. It doesn't mean you can't get cancer. What it means is that there are smaller, the percentages are somewhat lower, okay? And important, that's really important in our society. Now, fortified plant milk. Soy, as I mentioned, is the best fortified plant milk, okay, because it has these benefits that are listed and I mentioned as well. And remember that GMO is irrelevant. Almost all of our foods are GMO, and they make a lot of big deal about GMO soy. And a lot of this misinformation, or most of the misinformation about soy, comes from animal agriculture industry, and then takes on a life of its own on social media and through various influencers and people like that really say bad things about soy. But in fact, it is the most sustainable and efficient protein. One of the most easiest and cheapest to produce organically anyways. So great, you can get non-GMO organic soy cheaper than almost any other non-GMO organic food. Produces fantastic protein, and it should be fortified with calcium and B12, and you can actually put higher levels of B12 in it than you get from dairy milk anyways. You can also put vitamin D and some other things in there, but B12 and calcium being the most important. Now, what about other plant milks? Most people are going for other plant milks. The animal agriculture industry has been so successful in making soy sound really, really bad and causing a lot of psychological fear kind of around soy, that the other ones have become more popular. But what I consider them is white water. They're using oats, almonds, cashew, whatever, to turn the color of your water white and change the flavor, okay? But it doesn't give you any protein. And as far as the research shows, it doesn't have the benefits that soy milk would have. Soy is mostly a whole food. You're getting most of the soybean in there when you are consuming soy milk. But when you're consuming almond, cashew, oats, and stuff like that, when in a milk form, you're getting very little of the original food in there. You're better off eating almonds, eating cashews, eating oats, oatmeal, and things like that, but leaving the milk for soy. Now, pea milk has high protein. This may be good too, but it's harder to make into a milk, and it's not going to be quite as sustainable. And they have to add more sort of extra ingredients to make it sort of in a milky sort of emulsion that people like to drink. So what is the role of industry? That's where industry needs to come in. And I've been working with, trying to help educate some of the industry in India so that they can produce, sustainable options and have a bit of a mind shift. Because industry is promoting their products as being healthier, but that's not true necessarily. If you are somebody like my family consuming 30% of your protein from dairy milk, and you switch to, let's say, oat milk or almond milk, which has pretty much no protein in it, like 1 gram, it's almost nothing, then you are misinforming people who are already maybe having a low protein intake to having a lower protein intake, okay? So that is wrong information. As well, they say that they're sustainable, but their things are packaged in Tetra Paks. Tetra Paks are about one of the worst things that you can do for the planet. There are billions produced every single day. They will hang out in the environment in pieces and in terms of chemicals long-term that will stay in the environment for hundreds of years, and they will continue to affect the health of plants, ecosystems, animals, and humans for generations and generations to come, probably maybe causing as much death as the milk that they're replacing, okay? So we have to be very honest about the ecological crisis that we are facing and not be, and not have sort of false information that we're selling an ecological healthy project in a Tetra Pak, all right? So what we want is affordable, high quality soy milk We also want to look out for social justice. That's the other thing I mentioned. Most of those, in Canada, we can get the soy milk like Silk that I showed a slide, right? But in places like India, you can't afford that. Most people cannot afford those things. So if we're going to be social just in our pursuit of plant-based diets and veganism, then we have to produce something that is accessible to everybody, all right? Even more accessible than dairy milk is. So we want affordable, high-quality, fortified soy milk available worldwide, including the global poor, and we want it to be ecological to reduce or eliminate packaging. We want to shift government policy, and we can also consider, now this is a bit of a different topic but related, some kind of a plant-based multivitamin for kids and adults. And I'm specifically talking about the Indian context because in Europe you have Veg 1, but we would like maybe to have something like that in North America, but definitely in developing countries as well, okay? An evidence-based scientific kind of thing that's affordable, again, ecologically packaged. Now, what are the options of having reduced packaging for soy milk, okay? Now, if you fresh deliver soy milk, if you create businesses that fresh deliver, fortified soy milk to your door every day, like what Asha mentioned, comes to your door every day, that would be fantastic. They can go utensil to utensil, zero packaging. You can have spray dried soy milk powder. I use this in our wedding in India, my wife and I, and that has very low amounts of packaging. But the problem is it's not fortified with B12 or calcium at this point, but I've been talking to the manufacturer in India. They're interested in trying to get this going, okay? Pouches of milk, so milk bags, which still use plastic, but use less plastic than a Tetra Pak, would be another option as well, okay? Not perfect, but a little bit, a lot better than Tetra Paks. And then fresh homemade soy milk. So that would be great, but we have to have some kind of commercial standardized fortification so you make sure that you're adding calcium and B12 into that, or even at least just calcium, because you might take B12 in a B12 pill form or something like that, okay? And remember again about Tetra Paks. In developed countries, if you consume Tetra Paks, they mostly go to landfills. Even if you put them in the recycling, they're probably going to a landfill, okay? And in developing countries, they cause massive eco-contamination because mostly there's not a system that puts them in landfills, and they go everywhere into the environment, into the ocean, rivers, everything. Okay. And I've mentioned some of this. These are some on the right here. You see some of these plastic package, soy milk powder package. Again, there's spray dried soy milk. That's from Urban Platter in India, and it uses less packaging basically than the Tetra Paks would. Although it's not perfect. And some other options there. Another comment on misinformation is that there's so much misinformation out there right now about regenerative grazing, humane dairies, all of these things. And we have to really know our stuff to show, what the realities are and challenge misinformation and show people what's really going on. And this also includes research, that is published in journals that it comes from animal agriculture. So I hope I haven't taken over my time too much. I'm so sorry if I have. But check out our website, and there's a little specimen of a vegan baby right there for your enjoyment.
Tushar, thank you so much. You're right on time, and we really appreciate the presentation. I know that there are some questions in the Q&A, and we're going to hold them until after my talk. And so my talk is next, and thank you for sharing that cute picture of Kiva as well. I'm going to just stop my video for a second because my tech support, spiritual and emotional partner, Christian, is going to help me get set up. So give me just a minute while he helps me get set up. I'll be back on video momentarily. All right, so I'm back and I'm experimenting with the technique that Chris was showing yesterday with the presenter and the slideshow and background. So let's see how this goes. Really appreciate everybody hanging in for this third of our presentations in this panel, and I'll launch in. So you've already heard my bio, and what I bring to this talk, and I think I'm going to change where this video part is here. What I bring to this talk is my experience as a lifelong Jain. I've been born and raised in a family. My parents actually were helped to co-found the Jain Society of Chicago way back when. I'm also a student of mindfulness meditation in the Thich Nhat Hanh tradition of Buddhism. I'm a vegan for about 33 years, having come to it because Siddhachalam hosted a New Jersey Animal Rights Alliance convention back in something like 1989, 1990. And that's when I learned about what happens with dairy. And so my Jain roots brought me there, and the animal rights friends taught me what I know, what really propelled me to become vegan back then. I did live a year in Ahmedabad, and this was in 2015. At that time, was fortunate enough to actually have soy milk delivered in glass bottles by a service there, and was able to return them. And I don't recall if it was calcium fortified. I believe it might have been B12 fortified. So it is possible. We actually had this experience in India. I've been a physician for about 27 years. I've worked in medical practice, but mostly worked in public health, vaccine development, and majority of my time at this point professionally has been in cancer drug safety, with some experience in bioethics. Now, the bioethics, I've kind of wanted to do more broadly than drug development bioethics, and some of what I've learned about climate change is related to global bioethics as well. And I bring to this talk and the volunteer work that I've tried to do an intention to serve. So my husband, Christian, set up the website veganjains.com as a gift to me before we knew that there was such a thing called jainvegans.org. I know it's confusing, but that is a sister organization in the UK that really also helped drive some of the UK organizations to become vegan. I am a past chair of Ahimsa Vegan Committee and continue as a board member. And as well, am a board member of Love and Arms, and I hope you all had the chance to listen to Charlene's wonderful presentation yesterday. So next, I'm going to talk about kind of an expanded definition of health and ahimsa. And some of these sources are Jain and not. So ahimsa is more than not doing violence. It is more than an attitude, it is a whole way of life. For modern Jains, this is, I think, according to the BBC website, the concept also includes the positive elements of working for justice, peace, liberation, and freedom. Health, according to the WHO, is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. And what motivates us to change? Proper knowledge and proper perspective, reinforcing proper conduct. Ratnatraya, Samyak Darshan, Samyak Gyan, Samyak Charitra. So to Asha's question about, how can we change? Knowledge, which we've been exposed now to some very important information from Asha and Tushar, is part of it. Perspective is part of it. We hope that our Jain values form that perspective, and we hope that the conduct follows and reinforces these other parts of the three jewels. We have a story of the elephant Meru Prabha, who raised his leg in order to save a small rabbit as a forest fire raged all around them. This, to me, is a very interesting story. It talks about the importance of our individual compassion, but in the context of One Health, which I'll talk about, health of the environment, human beings, and animals. It also shows like the conundrums that we might find ourselves in when there's something like a forest fire raging around us, when we are in a situation of increasing threats to our health globally. Our Jain value incorporates the truth that all living beings are interdependent, parasparopagraho jivanam. And our lifestyle and values as Jains are really grounded in ahimsa, aparigraha, non-possessiveness, and living simply. And way back, as far as 1999, 2000, there was a Jain Declaration on Nature before we had a language about the climate crisis or climate change, which put forth the connections between our values and our concern for the environment. So we're coming to this presentation and our discussion about the interconnectedness of human, environmental, and animal health, not in isolation, but as part of our tradition. So ahimsa, as we've discussed, is more than not doing violence, and veganism limits our violence to panchindriya. It forms a part of our environmental care to all life down to ekindriya. So panchindriya is 5 sensed, ekindriya are 1 sense beings, and we know there's a hierarchy in which we try to avoid violence to as much as we can, but especially to those of higher sensed creatures. And aparigraha, as we know, is limiting one's consumption and material possessions, benefits the earth and all beings, and asteya refrains from stealing from our planet, other beings, and future generations. We've talked about dairy as a form of stealing from the mother cow and her calves. I'm going to introduce a concept that's called One Health. Human, animal, and environmental health are one health. All lives depend on air, food, and waters to sustain our bodies. The safety and cleanliness of these elements is threatened by human industrial and energy use. Cancer, asthma, heart disease, and more can be linked to specific toxic exposures, which these exposures can affect workers, can affect us as consumers, can affect people, the residents, usually the poorest communities, are the ones that are most affected by toxic exposures. Climate is linked to livability and disease risks. Global warming has direct and indirect effects. And as we've been living in the past several years, spillover diseases from animals to humans demonstrate our connectedness and become more likely as we exploit other beings. That was the scientific concept of One Health. I think this is very linked to our Parasparam Pagraho Jivanam, the ethics of care and interbeing. As we've discussed, human, animal, and environmental health are one health. And we also know all life is bound together. We're interdependent and we depend on air, food, and water to sustain our bodies. Poor communities are most affected, but everyone's affected by climate crisis. So for an example of direct health effects, and I know that Tushar covered some of this, so I'm trying to overlap as little as possible. Changes in the environment impact our diet and disease patterns, including impacting agricultural yields, increasing the range of disease vectors like mosquitoes that cause malaria and dengue, and there will be more environmental refugees. And the Department of Defense has stated that global warming will intensify challenges of global instability, hunger, poverty, and conflict. They will likely lead to food and water shortages, pandemic disease, disputes over refugees, and destruction by natural disasters in regions across the globe. It is already happening and is extremely sad to see. Environmentally, an increase in global temperatures may cause changes such as rising sea level, flooding, submerged islands, changes in the amount and pattern of precipitation. We've seen flooding and droughts increasing, increases in extreme water events, record heats, shrinking lakes, wildfires, including where we moved from California now to Canada, that has now affected the Northeast and Midwest and other areas. We've all seen the glacier retreats, the permafrost melt, reduced summer stream flows. The polar bear's habitat is threatened with effects much beyond that one species. Acidification of the oceans, destruction of wildlife habitats, endangered species. We're in the 7th major extinction, which is human caused. So ahiṃsā, our ahiṃsā is affecting humans, animals, plants, the whole planet. Close to home, many people will have been familiar with Indian villagers and the poverty that they have endured for so long. The droughts that are increasingly happening just add to their burden. Animal agriculture leads to animal and human diseases. Tushar touched on some. As Jains, if we are not vegan, we are contributing to the demand because we consume dairy. Dairy cows, in addition to what we've discussed as harms to humans, dairy cows get mastitis, bovine leukemia virus, milk fever, an equivalent of HIV, bovine immunodeficiency virus, endometritis, numerous injuries and fractures. Will Tuttle, one of the Buddhist scholars, has said, how can we expect dairy to help our bone health if we're consuming a product that leads to fractures in cows? It just defies what our understanding of karma is. Hormones in dairy may lead to premature puberty and other hormonally linked diseases such as cancer. As Jains, we have to reflect on direct pratyaksha versus indirect paroksha violence. There are forms of violence that we traditionally recognize, eating meat, even killing mosquitoes. New forms of violence that we are participating in modern times include those to dairy cows and for some that eat eggs, egg-laying hens. And like we've been talking about, climate change and plastic pollution. And in Jainism, we're responsible for unintentional as well as intentional violence. And we can make the choices that we make and face the karmic consequences. So I'm going to switch gears and talk a little bit about concepts in health and prevention. There are different levels of prevention. You'll hear people talking about preventative medicine and preventive medicine. So on a societal level, there's something called primordial prevention, which is preventing something before it even becomes a risk. And in an individual level, there's primary prevention, preventing something before you have disease. Then what you often will hear about as prevention is really screening, early detection for timely treatment. You'll hear about mammograms and PSAs and other tests that are called secondary prevention. And then there's treatment to prevent complications, which is tertiary prevention. So it might be something like going early to the ER if you have a heart attack so that you don't have worse complications. Secondary prevention might be, getting an EKG. Primary prevention for heart disease might be an aspirin. But there are better ways of primary prevention as well. And we all know what a cure is. And then there's also a concept of reversal. So I'm just laying the foundation here because we have one way of promoting health and addressing all these levels of prevention. And that is choosing healthy plant-based whole foods. Our bodies absorb nutrients very well from these sources. They're healthy for heart, kidneys, bones. The ones that promote health also prevent, reverse, or cure diseases. And animal foods in general are higher in hormones, environmental toxins, pathogens, and other harmful bacteria. Like Tushar mentioned, whole fat dairy is particularly harmful. Like other animal foods, it contains cholesterol and saturated fats. Animal foods can have sulfuric acids and can contain antibiotics and other drugs. Going vegan is consistent with One Health. Choose whole foods, plant foods. Veganism is primordial prevention, primary prevention, and tertiary prevention. It helps prevent the risk factors. It helps if you have the disease. It is a very holistic approach to promoting health. Whole foods plants, whole plant foods with minimal salt, sugar, and oil are ideal. Now you'll hear people talk about whole foods plant-based. That does not necessarily mean exclusively vegan. But what I'm talking about is whole plant foods. Choose vegan, whole plants, minimally processed. And they can also prevent and reverse harm to animals and the environment. Perhaps tertiary prevention, mitigating the harms that we've already caused for the planet. I want to call your attention to the Jain Declaration on the Climate Crisis, which Sudhanshu Jain and I co-authored and was adopted by the Jain Executive Committee in October 2019. And even since then, things have gotten worse. This was available on the Jaina website. I believe it still is. And the screenshot shows you how to get there. It may be in a different location, and we'll have to get back to you if it's not right there. But it goes through what individuals can do at an individual level, community level as Jains, and as global citizens. And this is a bit of a crowded slide. It will be burdensome to talk through the whole thing, but I'll point out some highlights. So really, as an individual, there are ways that we can try to move our lifestyles towards the simplicity of sadhvis and sadhus and choose less harm. It is important to educate ourselves. We can continue abstaining from meat and eggs and really move towards, and if you can, just eliminate dairy products, thereby minimizing use of water, avoiding toxic waste, and minimizing your contribution to the climate crisis. You can minimize material wastage, rely less on car ownership, and if you do drive, you can choose a fully electric vehicle or at least a very efficient fossil fuel car, reduce air travel. This is something the Jains don't particularly do as a community, but we can choose to live in a home that is as small as possible, use energy-saving technologies and renewable energy, and really buy and own fewer material goods. We have the 3 R's that many of us are familiar with: reduce, refuse, and recycle. There's another that Jains actually probably know about: refuse or renounce. Our tradition is one of living simply. We can actually choose not to take those plastic water bottles. We can choose to avoid the Tetra Pak. You know, with soy milk, you can actually make it without any packaging whatsoever at home. You can cook soybeans, blend them with a high-speed blender, add a date and vanilla, and you have soy milk free of any packaging at all. In India as well, you know, people have tried to introduce soy milk machines. And with the power that we have as Jains in business, we could do a lot should we decide to commit. In addition, as lay people, we can use our material resources, not just to simplify our life, but acknowledging that we work. We can practice right livelihood, ensuring that our work or business can benefit the climate. If we have money and time to volunteer, we can use it to help organizations focused on environmental justice, animal and human well-being. And if we have money to invest, ensure that the companies we support are helping and not harming the climate and not harming working people and other living beings. What can we do as a community? Well, we can serve only vegan food and use only vegan items and rituals. We can minimize waste, eliminate styrofoam, use reusable plates and cutlery, use compostable or biodegradable. There's actually a brand of biodegradable cutlery coming out of India, which is edible. It uses lentils, and it's pictured at the bottom here. I just saw it in a US store as well. Consider when you're planning where to put a temple. Is it close to public transportation? Can you add energy-saving technologies like solar panels? If you already have a temple somewhere, Can you facilitate carpools for people to get to the temple so that we minimize greenhouse gas emissions and build community? You know, as Tushar mentioned, waste in India looks different from waste in the US, but both are harmful. Like waste in India, you can see people, you know, walking among the trash, the plastic bags, the detritus of our industrialized community in India side by side with poverty. It is just everywhere in India, despite the movement, you know, towards cleanliness that the government promotes. In Northern California, where we moved from, you know, last year, there are landfills. There is violence there too. There are birds and other living beings that get caught in landfills. So whether your Tetra Pak ends up in places people walk or in places that birds frequent, this is impactful to living beings and it's harmful. 8 million tons of plastic land in the ocean. There's a Great Pacific Garbage Patch and 4 more. There is not a place that you throw things out that it just disappears. It ends up in oceans as well. In Jain centers, what I've noticed is disposable culture prevails. There are other options. In the Buddhist community that I sometimes practice with on retreats, we clean up after ourselves in a more sustainable way. There's a bucket for composting here. People are rinsing their dishes in soapy water, less soapy water, sanitizing, and at the end, it gets put in a tray and sanitized. We can do this, should we put our minds to it. The Jain Center of Northern California, again, which was my home Jain Center until recently, has a solar system that folks advocated for. This helps to make the environmental impact less. The solar panels are on top of where people park their cars. I would advocate for adding car charging stations. And recently, the Bay Area Rapid Transit System actually expanded so that JCNC is accessible by public transport more than it ever used to be. So beyond our community, beyond our individual actions, what should we advocate for as we are global citizens? We can ask governments and businesses to incentivize ahiṃsā over short-term profit. We can incentivize beneficial technology and veganic agriculture that is not requiring animal inputs. Reforesting, at least to stop cutting trees. We can ask governments and businesses to remove subsidies for fossil fuels, factory farming, and chemical pollutants, and go as far as banning harmful products like plastic and chemical pesticides. We can help to show the world that a plant-based diet is healthy and critical to reverse the climate crisis. Dairy is suffering, rape, and death for cows. Cheese has the 3rd highest carbon footprint. We need to talk with our friends about how bad an animal food-based diet is for all of us, to find a language that transcends culture and religion, but is still true to our own. How do we advocate? And this is a key point also with love. What do I mean by that? There's a particular definition of love in Jainism, and Buddhism shares similar concepts towards self and others. Maitri is loving kindness. To approach change with loving kindness for ourselves and with others, with compassion for all living beings, with equanimity. People may not change the way we want, when we want. We have to be equanimous that people have their own time and their own choice. That doesn't make them escape the consequences of karma, and we do our best. And with appreciation for those who walk the path with us, before us, and after us. And there's more about this, about the attitudes that we can cultivate in a climate-focused pratikaman that I helped to write, and it's on veganjains.com, which you might want to view should you be interested before Paryushan. There's also some very specific, frequently asked questions on healthy vegan diets that come up, and Tushar covered some of them. I'll cover a few more. Actually, I'm not time checking myself since I'm talking, although I'm the moderator. So if somebody could let me know in the panel if I'm going over, I would really appreciate it, so I know how much more time I have. So I'm going to just see if somebody's going to let me know how much more time I have.
Gina, you're about 5 minutes over, but it's okay because we have a 30-minute Q&A, so you still have about 24 minutes or so for Q&A.
Okay, well, yeah, thank you for that. So I'm indulging everyone to kind of consider this part of the Q&A because this comes up so much. So people sometimes ask about how important it is to have organic food and what this veganic agriculture is about. So organic fruits and vegetables have been shown to have better nutritional value. It is healthier for farm workers. And I don't know what this other typo is. They may still use animal matter to fertilize and insects to kill other insects. So organic does not mean ahiṃsā free. There's a small but growing movement for veganic agriculture. It is sometimes difficult to find, and you may try your hand at gardening, which is itself a whole project. So this is something to think about. I think organic is better than conventional, and veganic is better still. Food preparation. Sometimes people asked about raw versus cooked. There are raw food advocates. What I have learned as a student of this and having attended some raw food and vegan food health focused conferences is that although raw food has a lower glycemic index and retains nutrients in some foods, raw food is also less digestible for other foods. And there's some foods that actually become better nutritionally, like there's more bioavailable vitamin A when you cook tomatoes, for example, which is better for men's prostate health. So most scientists consider boiling and steaming as good methods of food preparation, but not frying and broiling. Baking may produce some unhealthy byproducts. And what Tushar mentioned about the healthfulness of dairy products compared to alternatives. The context of this slide is really, I think, in the context of well-fed populations, such as most of the middle class and upper class Jains in India and globally, and including those in the US. So for those of us that are getting enough nutrients from a variety of foods, not limited to soy, other legumes such as mung and chana and these other plant-based foods that we use, and a variety of calories. If we're trying to actually limit our caloric consumption, then we have to choose foods that have a lower energy density. So what's at the top here are foods with lower energy density: leafy greens, cruciferous vegetables, stems, bulbs, and mushrooms, with increasing energy density going towards the bottom with fruits and cereals and pulses. These are important for nutrients, but they have increasing energy density, including nuts and seeds. And then animal foods also have increasing energy density, but they also have a lot of toxins. So depending on your needs, you will want to choose from the top, the leafy greens bubble, down to the right bottom plant foods bubble, and choose foods in each of these areas. Vitamins to supplement. So as Tushar mentioned, vitamin B12 is problematic. There's been studies that even lacto-vegetarians in India are deficient in vitamin B12, and older folks of all dietary choices absorb vitamin B12 less well. And so it is important to check blood levels and to supplement. There's particular tests you can check for the functional activity of B12 as well as just the level of B12. Vitamin D is also an issue, and it's not just for vegans or vegetarians. Many of us living inside most of our lives are affected. 30 minutes of full body sun exposure per day for medium Indian skin tones is required, which is not possible for most of us. Or supplement with the vegan D3 or D2. Most D3 is produced from sheepskin or lanolin. Vegan D3 is now widely available. Omega-3 fatty acids come up for some folks as a concern. Flax, and these are some recommended foods for the precursor to omega-3 fatty acids. In addition to what I mentioned earlier, you can get the vegan DHA. So flax oil, about 1 teaspoon a day, ground flax seeds, 1 to 2 teaspoons, walnuts, 2 to 3 tablespoons, or walnut oil, canola oil, soybean oil. Olive oil would need to be taken in high quantities, is not recommended as a source for omega-3 fatty acids. Vitamins, vaccinations, and medicine. So this comes up. Some vegans tend to avoid all kinds of medication. That would not be my recommendation. As we mentioned, there's vegan vitamin D3 or D2, vegan DHA made from seaweed. There are some flu vaccines that are cell culture derived rather than egg-based. And we heard yesterday from Shaleen about the pregnant mare's urine source of estrogen replacement. There are plant-based alternatives. There's the generic version derived from yams. Esterase is the brand name that I remembered back in residency. And this is fine for women needing estrogen replacement. Really, it's kind of a case-by-case thing to try to understand for particular supplements, for particular medications, what the alternatives and the best choices are. And some have said, because animals are used in research, we should avoid all kinds of the fruits of modern medicine altogether. That, again, would not be my recommendation. although some animal testing is involved, we need to actually promote for a systemic change. Just like we want to promote One Health and have systemic alternatives available to us for healthy lifestyle choices, we want to have alternatives to animals in researching, which would involve sweeping changes to research regulations, drug development, scientific models, and really our cultural views towards animals that would be needed. We who are Jain health professionals can help shape these efforts. My past work with biopharma companies confirms that companies aren't committed to harming animals, but they're not prevention focused. Regulations drive them. The European regulations are driving alternatives. And advocacy in the US by PCRM, Center for Contemporary Sciences, and other organizations deserve our support. This will enable us to make better choices in the future. So I wanted to help to credit Sudhanshu, the Climate Reality Project, Dr. Clapper for health and environment focused slides, and many others, and to direct you to veganjains.com website for other resources. You can email veganjains@gmail.com. And that will conclude the formal presentation, and we'll now move to our Q&A.
And Gina, I've put a summary of questions, if it's helpful for you, in the chat. Thank you so much.
Okay, I'm going to go to the chat here. So thank you so much, Chris, for monitoring that as we were going through. And time check, we have until what time for the Q&A here?
Until 40 past the hour. So
okay, 17 minutes. Okay, so thank you everybody for your indulgence. So I'm going to direct a question to Tushar that has come up in the chat about soy, and there were questions raised about harms to the soil, thyroid, you know, and based on the research you've done and that's posted on Plant-Based Diet, I know you can give us a robust answer to whether there are harms of soy to the environment and soil, as well as human health.
Yeah, so basically I could start to say that if you grow anything in the world and 8 billion people, or pretty soon 10 billion people, are going to consume whatever we grow, there are going to be ecological impacts of everything. But soy actually has the lowest impact of almost any protein that we can produce, because it takes the least amount of land, probably amongst the least amount of water, not probably, but I think it takes amongst the least amount of water. It's the easiest and cheapest to grow organic and veganic, actually. It, being a lentil, it brings its own nitrogen from the air into the soil, so it benefits the soil by reducing fertilizer use and everything like that. Soy is bad for the environment because most of soy that is like 70 to 80% of soy that's grown around the world is used for animal feed. So the vast majority of soy is used for animal feed. And as we mentioned, this is inefficient. It uses more land to grow animals. So in that sense, it is not good for the environment. And most of the GMO, heavily pesticided, you know, soy and other foods are going to be animal feed. So when we stop consuming, let's say, dairy milk and other sources or other animal foods, we will vastly use less farmland, which can then be returned to nature and rewilded. So soy consumption, the second most use, is for biofuels. Again, those things are really bad. People sell them as an ecological solution, but they're very bad for the environment, bad for food security, bad for the global poor. But soy consumption directly for humans in the form of soy protein, let's say, like, you know, just eating soybeans like edamame or soy milk or tofu and those kind of things, that is very, very efficient and very, very ecological, having amongst the lowest impact of anything that we can eat, with a lot of very strong health benefits too. So it depends what you're using the soy for. If you're using it for animal feed, biofuels, bad. Human consumption, good. When it comes to thyroid, there's a lot of misinformation. There's one study that in a test tube, there was some adverse effect to some thyroid cells by adding huge amounts of isoflavones or something like that. That's a test tube study. But as physicians, we know that we need human studies, clinical studies, studies that show what food actually does, or a medication or a treatment actually does in real human beings. The few studies that we have regarding soy and thyroid show that people actually have slightly lower rates of chronic hypothyroidism, maybe about 25% less. That's not a very big, serious thing because we have easy thyroid replacement. But actually, overall, the evidence shows that soy consumption benefits the thyroid. But the misinformation that goes out there always scares people that it's showing harm based on this test tube study. And as such, there's animal studies that feed rats really, really high amounts of isoflavones, and shows that they have higher rates of breast cancer. And so the animal agriculture industry uses this kind of a study to scare people and then promote this message that goes viral everywhere that soy is bad for breast cancer. But the human studies, of which there are more and better studies than this single couple of rat studies, those are the ones that we really need to pay attention to. And those consistently show that there is less breast cancer in terms of primary prevention, and also at least 3 studies showing secondary prevention, so that soy consumers after a breast cancer diagnosis have slightly better outcomes.
I've also read, Tushar, that people need to consume adequate iodine, and that will help with thyroid health. So some of what might be attributed, and maybe Asha, you've also heard about this in your practice. You want to go ahead with that?
Yeah, I definitely wanted to. A couple of years ago, Dr. Weiss and we started testing our patients on, doing the 24-hour urine test. And that's when we started seeing, because at our practice, we also do no added salt. So that was like many have that, they get the iodine. And yes, you were absolutely right. And we started asking our patients, once we do that test, we will ask them to have nori or maybe a supplement, either whichever way they are going. We're not too much encouraging about the added salt, but if people want to go with that, it's okay. It's totally a personal journey. So yeah.
I mean, I personally advocate for iodized salt. Friends and family ask me about Himalayan, and I'm just like, well, I'm not really sure what the evidence is there, but I would say iodized salt is a way to very easily get your iodine, though we don't encourage excessive salt consumption. There's lots of harms of that.
Yeah, I think the supplement has helped all our patients, because we do that. So Gina, just to kind of, because our patients don't do added salt, so it helps them with the supplement and the nori. Those have been a big success in our practice. We've seen a big rise.
And these are really good points. Like if we are consuming salt, it should be limited, and it should be in the form of iodized salt, right? That's in North America and India, where law says that commercially available salt, most of it should be iodized. There might be some special varieties that are non-iodized, and that's a problem. Also, people who consume very low or no added salt are at risk of iodine deficiency, so a supplement is in order. When we look at Europe, places like the UK do not have iodized salt. Some other countries too. They put iodine in the dairy milk. So in those places, the soy milk and plant-based milks, etc., should be iodized, or those people they would have to find somewhere an iodized salt, because most of the salt over there is not iodized. And also in the UK, they have a veg supplement called Veg 1 available, made by the Vegan Society. And because it's made in the UK, it contains iodine, because again, over there, if you're switching to plant-based milk, a lot of times it may not be fortified with iodine, so they put that in the supplement, and there's some complexities around that. But yeah, definitely, we should make sure about iodine. In North America, India, it's going to come through salt or supplement, basically.
There were also some questions about ensuring enough omega-3s and vitamin K in the diet, and I will share the slide that I had in my presentation about sources of omega-3 or omega-3 precursor. Vitamin K has a couple of different forms. One form is very available in dark green leafy vegetables, which are also a great source of calcium, specifically like kale and collard greens and mustard greens. There's another form, I believe it's K2, that's important for bone health. I don't know, Asha or Tushar, if you have experience with that particular micronutrient.
I think there's no.
You're right. Sorry, you're right. At our practice, we rely a lot on the dark leaf green vegetables. We definitely have that as a big. And I know the nutrient is important, but I think a big part in our practice is we are big 50% exercise, 50% food kind of so we know that we have to impact that jumps, those yoga poses. Our patients are encouraged to focus on exercise, because that's another way. So, it's all integrated, but yeah, those would be my comments.
Tushar? I don't know if it's on my end, but Tushar's video just froze, so I'm not sure if he's having a tech challenge. I think he might have just lost connection for a moment. Okay, so there's also questions about fortification process. How to ensure that it excludes animal products, and it really does vary by region. So I think we have to do our research, whether we're in India, North America, Europe, etc. Sometimes there's labeling. We can advocate for more labeling. Tushar, you're back. Okay, so I don't know if you had anything more to say about vitamin K or ensuring that fortification process excludes animal products, which is the next topic that I pulled from our chat.
So regarding vitamin K1 and K2, this is just something that is promoted by the animal agriculture industry that tries to create scaremongering amongst people who are going to eat more plant-based. There's no real evidence, I think, that K1 is any less good than K2 or anything like that, right? But in terms of fractures and bone health for vegans, there is some evidence, and this is very important, that vegans have higher rates of hip fractures. Now, this comes from data in 2 studies. Hip fractures are very devastating. They can result in death and disability and whatnot. So this is an important consequence of bone health. And what the data really shows is that people who are very underweight, especially in mainly females, so females who are very slim and are vegan, have higher rates of fractures compared to omnivores. Now, probably the biggest factor here is being underweight, but also there are some women probably who consume too less protein and maybe are too much underweight. So those are things we need to be careful about. Being too much underweight, especially for women, that's where the problem lies in the data. And consuming enough protein, as well as calcium and all these things, and probably vitamin D consumption is going to be important in there too. Getting enough sunlight and definitely doing exercise, as I think Gina and Asha both mentioned, that exercise and weight-bearing exercise is extremely important. So it doesn't necessarily mean that veganism is better for everything across the board automatically. We have to make sure we do it in the proper way. And this is going to be one thing that we really look out for. And that's why the fortified soy milk is really important for the protein and everything like that, the protein and calcium. In terms of the fortification and supplements, vitamin D and omega-3s, as Gina already mentioned, are the main ones that will come from animal sources commonly, and that there are good vegan alternatives available, exactly from like what Gina's slide mentioned.
I would just add about what I'm aware of regarding the increased fractures found in studies like Epic Oxford, that it was specifically linked to less than, I think it was 350 milligrams of calcium consumption per day. So what I tell my parents, my mom who has osteoporosis, my friends, myself, I have as a consequence of being tested as a resident for a new bone scan machine, I know that I have risk for osteoporosis. Intentionally eat dark green leafy vegetables that are high in calcium, such as mustard greens, calcium. Do weight-bearing exercise like Asha mentioned, yoga poses or specific yoga for osteoporosis. Get enough vitamin D, check your levels, supplement properly, and it's not just about that bone density score. There's also something called bone quality. There's also maintaining one's balance. There's a holistic approach to preventing osteoporosis, as in all aspects of health, and it's not about drinking milk. In fact, there are also observational studies linking milk consumption to fractures. So the answer is not drinking milk. The answer is really understanding all the factors that would prevent and reverse if you have already osteopenia or osteoporosis.
And I'm just going to add to that
I just wanted to add, Gina and Tushar, at our practice, we encourage minimum, especially if somebody is diagnosed with osteopenia, at least minimum 60 grams of proteins. And as a lifestyle coach, that's the area where we kind of then start honing in. We encourage our patients to kind of create food log. It's an ongoing process. It's not like, because you would have to see your patterns and how, and yes, many of the leafy vegetables, we use those for upping their calcium intake because it's very easy. It's more absorbable. That's the beauty.
And I see
what you're saying, Asha. I was going to support what you're saying, Asha, that there's evidence that a gram of protein per kilogram of body weight is probably a good idea.
Yeah.
Mainly, maybe more towards your ideal body weight. So it's going to be more if you're too skinny and maybe less if you're overweight or obese. And so getting enough protein is really important, and the calcium, as you mentioned, as well. And yeah.
Yeah,
people
and I would
often in
say,
the plant-based world underestimate. People often in the plant-based world say that, oh, protein is no big deal. Protein is no big deal. That's not quite true. That's an oversimplification. There are people who consume vastly too much protein, but there's a lot of people who underconsume as well. And so we have to find where we are on that spectrum and go accordingly.
absolutely. And early on, people used to cite, based on lab rat data, that those who consume the most meat have the most fractures, and therefore it's excess protein that's the issue. And since then, we don't trust that data. And it is now important to acknowledge that the right amount of protein is helpful. And we can't dismiss these concerns. We want to be healthy for ourselves and to advocate for the things that are important. And so totally agree. Now, we have a few minutes left, and some of the other questions that we have are really important, and they kind of actually start to blend into the advocacy panel that will happen after the keynote, and probably also Ruchika Chitrabrahma will address some of this. I'll just name a couple things here about lifestyle, how to convince family to give up dairy, and family members who say sadhus and sadhvis consume dairy. I think Tushar addressed the expense of soy and its current form and what we can advocate for to make it more accessible. People are asking for recipes. We do have some resources. And they were asking about the dairy myth in India, how that originated. And I might wait until we hear from Ruchika and the final panel, because that I think might be something worth exploring at the end. There's an interesting thought here of making Jain centers lifestyle and wellness centers in addition to spiritual centers. So the question was how to discuss how we can develop each Jain center to be the resource center for their local community to learn and practice plant-based Jain lifestyle. And I do recall in the Jain Center of Northern California, there were several health fairs that included talks by people like Dr. Michael Clapper, who was then in Northern California, as well as, animal rights advocates like Will Tuttle. And they had, health screenings, and it was like part of what that Jain Center did. I'm exploring that in the Jain Center of New Jersey. Let's see what is possible. I think it's been hard and what continues to be challenging with COVID times. But I'd like to hear Tushar and Asha, your thoughts on this vision, which is promising to me.
Yeah, I definitely would support it. Because we, as you know, Gina, coming to Ethos, we are like, we have the farm base, we have the farm, and we have the medical practice, so it's a very nice merge that we have at Ethos. So no, I would support, if it happens in New Jersey, I would definitely want to support and participate in. Yep.
I just want to answer a couple of, I think it's a great idea too. I don't think, I mean, the more it's just excellent, but I'm going to ask you a couple of questions in the chat. When somebody asked, is there evidence that you can overconsume soy? And I think if you're, consuming enormous amounts of protein, then that's, far more than, let's say, 2 grams of protein per kilogram per day or whatever like that, then yeah, you can cut back on your protein intake of soy and other sources too. I don't think it's possible to overconsume soy if you're getting sort of just a good normal amount of protein. But what I would encourage is variety. So if somebody's just eating soy all the time, I think it's better to have a variety of protein sources. So get soy in the form of soy milk. I tell my family drink 3 glasses a day at least, and you can have soy from other foods too, no problem. But make sure you're getting other sources of protein, because there's lots of beans and lentils and nuts and seeds, and all of these things are good for us. So we want to get a variety as well. So that's good. In terms of,
I just want to say, sorry, I just want to say we're kind of at time for this session.
Oh, okay.
And we do want to have a 5-minute break, but I will just add to what you said, in that we are blessed to have the Indian cuisine, variety of pulses and legumes. So yes, soy is an amazing and important source of protein, and we have chana and mug and all manner of other high protein sources, in addition to what's available to us in North America and Europe, in terms of nut products and other things. So variety is important. And with that,
just on the environmental,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. On the environmental front, I know I'm sort of going over here, but like I also want to emphasize realistically, when we're talking about environmental issues, this is critical that, you know, plant-based and vegan diets are definitely very, very, very important, okay? But that does not substitute the decrease in consumption in other areas of our life. It's not like we can go vegan and then just say, okay, now I can fly around and have a big house and drive a big car and all that kind of stuff, even if it's an electric car. And that holistic total decrease in consumption that Gina was mentioning is going to be really critical. And I think that's something that often happens in the vegan space, that people want to consume a lot of stuff and say, I'm vegan, so it's okay. But we want to get away from that. That's important to avoid that, that type of thinking. Sorry, Gina,
We have to
go
be
ahead.
truthful. Yeah, we have to be truthful and have integrity, right? So I think that's important. Not to take away time from our keynote speaker for today, I'd like to welcome us all to hear Ruchika Chitrabhanu. Ruchika is born and raised in a Jain family, and she's had a deep interest in the philosophy of Jainism. Ruchika pursued her master's in philosophy, majoring in Jainism, and she's also been inspired by Gurudev Chitrabhanu and Pramodaben Chitrabhanu. Ruchika has been a vegan for over 17 years, and she raises awareness about animal compassion and the benefits of following a vegan lifestyle through events and festivals in India. She is a co-founder of Ahimsa Fest, India's largest vegan festival, the Earth in One, an events platform to help people transition to a vegan lifestyle, and a board member of the Jain Vegan Initiative. And she actually and I worked together on a webinar about the meaning of Diwali in Jainism, and it was really a wonderful collaboration. Ruchika is a wonderful partner. She has really great insight into what's going on in India, and I am so looking forward to hearing you speak. Ruchika, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Gina, and Jai Jinendra, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Chris, Arihanta Institute, and Hope for giving me this opportunity. There are such wonderful speakers here, and it's so overwhelming to hear them. It's such an honor to be here. So my topic is facets of veganism in Jainism. And before I start speaking on that, I want to first touch base on the foundation and the fundamental principle of Jainism, that is Ahimsa, which is the cornerstone of every ethics and doctrine in Jainism. And without Ahimsa, no virtues and no principles would be of any significance. Ahimsa is a Sanskrit word which means non-violence, non-injury, and absence of desire to harm any life forms. So it's basically following Ahimsa through our thoughts, speech, and action. And I'd like to talk a little bit about causing harm to any life forms. But before that, we need to understand the relation between Ahimsa and existence. So in this universe, we see two elements. One is living, which is jiva, and the other is non-living, ajiva. Living is what we call as soul or atma, consciousness, sentient beings, divinity, and non-living is matter. Matter is made up of atoms which integrate and disintegrate. So everything that we see around us with our eyes is made up of matter, including our own bodies. So excluding the liberated soul, all worldly beings reside in a body. And according to Jainism, this universe is filled with living beings. And these living beings can be found in 6 forms of bodies, classified according to the senses they possess, such as touch, taste, smell, sight, and hearing. And these 6 forms of bodies are earth, water, fire, air, and plant kingdom. All these are one-sense beings, and they are immobile. And according to Jainism, earth, water, fire, and air are life themselves. Apart from supporting other forms of life, they themselves are life. And the 6th form of body is mobile beings. And mobile beings are further divided into 2-sense beings. And we know 2-sense beings have the sense of touch and taste. 3-sense beings have an additional sense of smell. 4 sense beings have touch, taste, smell, and sight. And then there's 5 sense beings who have all the 5 senses. And the 5 sense beings include animals, birds, humans, reptiles, amphibians, fishes, all of these. So as we see that life evolves from this 1 sense being to 5 sense being. So as common sense would say that the 5 sense being is the most evolved soul, if one has to see from that point of view. But according to Jainism again, irrespective of the size, shape, the different physical or spiritual developments, all life form has to be viewed as equal. And therefore, no life has the right to harm or injure or kill another life. All life forms have the right to live peacefully, without fear, and harmoniously. And this then makes us question, right? I mean, how does one quantify ahimsa? Because ahimsa is so abstract, it is so large. And in one of the scriptures, which is Agams, ahimsa is, kind of given a little framework. And it says that there is nothing smaller than an atom in this universe and nothing larger than space. So there is no virtue that can be more subtle or bigger than ahimsa. But someone who's starting out on this path of ahimsa, it can be extremely daunting because they wouldn't know where to start. Because if Jainism is saying that all living beings, in spite of their size and shape, are to be seen equally, and at the same time, our life depends on these 1 sense beings, because how do we survive without water or without air and without earth or without plants? So Jainism clarifies this and says that there is something called necessary violence or arthadanda, where it is practically impossible to survive without causing some harm to the smallest living beings. As I said, because we need to drink water, we need to breathe, we need to eat food, we need earth to use. And therefore it tells us that in order to survive, we have to make sure that we reduce our killing to the lowest form of life. And therefore, any killing towards the mobile beings, which are 2 to 5 sense beings, is absolutely unnecessary. That doesn't define our survival. That is only coming out of our desires and our pleasures, which is driven by greed. And greed then plays home to other negative passions, such as ego, anger, and deceit. So Jainism further clarifies and it simplifies this violence and tells us that there's 2 forms of violence. There's gross violence, which is causing harm or injury to another living being through our speech and action. And the subtle violence is causing harm through our thoughts and emotions. So violence is not always to be interpreted through killing, but also through these negative emotions. And as I said, that greed later plays home to other negative passions such as ego, anger, and deceit. And Jainism lays a lot of stress on gross ahimsa and how we should abstain from gross ahimsa. So like we saw that 2 to 5 sense beings are more evolved than 1 sense beings. So one thing we have to do is definitely move away from causing violence to the 2 to 5 sense beings. And as 5 sense beings, as humans ourselves, we can probably create a connection with another 5 sense being, like let's say a pet, because we can relate to their pain and pleasure. And when we create this connection with another living being, we are fostering a feeling of love and universal friendship towards them. So Jainism is indirectly guiding us by abstaining from gross violence towards abstaining from subtle violence as well, because this fostering of universal friendship will eventually make us more mindful it will make us less indulgent and take us towards a step of self-restraint. And self-restraint, which is Sanyam in Jainism, is the first step towards Ahimsa. So in an act of violence, we start from a thought that I want to consume, let's say, something of dairy or meat. So it starts with a thought. But to stop violence, we have to stop from the action. So we have to stop from gross ahimsa and then go towards subtle ahimsa. And in today's time, where gross violence has permeated into our lives in so many different ways, that in spite of being vegetarians, we may not be realizing that we are still consuming animal products in some form. And therefore, we can equate animal agriculture to gross violence today. And I came across this little chart, and I thought this was quite, it was quite elaborate, because we generally relate violence to killing and to meat and to eggs. So as vegetarian, we feel we are not part of that. But we forget that an industry uses every part of that animal. So what is not being used in the animal industry might be used in another industry as a byproduct or as a derivative to improve the quality of that product. Or their skin could be used for something else, or they could be used in certain medicines. So it is becoming so difficult to actually stay away from these animal products. And what can we do so that we are not part of this gross violence? And if we have to reflect on our life, there are so many ways we are supporting this kind of gross violence, either through leather, where they're using domesticated animals as well as wild animals, or through wool, where we can, where the sheep is reared brutally and eventually it goes to the slaughterhouse. The hens are used for chicken as well as eggs. In many countries, eggs are seen as vegetarian products. And in India now, there's huge marketing happening to say that eggs are vegetarian because they are unfertilized. There'll never be a chick coming out of it. So there's a huge marketing going on recently about this. There's oyster farming, fish farming, insect farming, bees harvesting. All these are kind of animal agriculture. And somewhere or the other, we are all a part of it. And of course, the worst is the dairy industry. So as vegetarian, if you're consuming dairy, we are supporting this cruelty, we are supporting this industry, and we are indirectly supporting the meat industry, because the meat industry gets its raw products from the dairy industry, at least in India. And now I want to talk about the facets of veganism in Jainism. And the first thing that Jainism says for a Jain is to stay away from certain foods called vigais. Vigais are foods which create negative passions in us. And it obstructs the path of a aspirant or someone who's on the path of spiritual seeking. And there are two categories in this. The larger category is called Mahavigai, which includes meat, butter, honey, and alcohol. In meat and honey, we can see direct violence happening. But in case of butter and alcohol, the reason why they're put in this category is because in that process of making butter and honey, there are millions of microorganisms that are caused, which die in this entire process. And that's why, as we said, unearth done, or the unnecessary violence, and because our survival doesn't depend on this, these are the four categories, these are the four kinds of foods which should be avoided at all times. And the other category, the lesser category or the lower category known as Lagu Vigai includes milk, yogurt, ghee, which is clarified butter, oil, jaggery, and derivatives of jaggery like sugar, and fried foods. These again obstruct the path of a spiritual seeker. And medicine today also talks about the health hazards and the environmental hazards, as we just heard Tushar and Gina and Asha speak about this. So the first aspect that Jainism is in lines with veganism is where it is saying that avoid the vigais or the negative passion creating foods. I want to now draw a parallel between animal agriculture and the violation of the 5 principles of Jainism. And in this case, I'm going to consider dairy, but this would be true for any of the animal agriculture industry or exploitation of any living being, whether it's on large scale or even small scale. So it would also hold true for small dairy farmers in India, because all across the practices are cruel. So the first law of Ahimsa, non-violence. Like we saw that in order to survive, there has to be certain violence caused to 1 sense being, without which we cannot survive. But violence caused to 2 to 5 sense being is absolutely unnecessary. And when it comes to violence, as vegetarians, we are constantly relating that to just meat or egg industry. And often as Jains and vegetarians, and this is what I used to feel, that I'm a vegetarian. I mean, what more can I do? I'm already practicing Ahimsa. There's nothing more I can do. And this was because we are so used to seeing the final product, right? In case of meat, we see there's blood. We see there's end of life. We see the animal dying. We see suffering. But in case of dairy, we don't see the violence, because the animal is not dying instantly. There is no blood. The next day, the animal is giving milk again. And we are conditioned to see the final product and not see the process that's happening before. But like how Jainism says that, like the smallest atom, Jainism defines Ahimsa to the subtlest form. And it says if the animal is domesticated, and if it is tied, its freedom is curbed, it's not given food or water on time, if there's breeding, if there's inflicting pain, if there's fear created in an animal, all these are forms of violence. And in animal agriculture, all these are prevalent. And therefore, we violate the first law of Jainism, that is of non-violence. And not to forget, eventually these animals go for slaughter. So Jainism further elaborates that executing violence directly or through someone else, or even appreciating an act done by someone else, they all bear the same result. The next one, just a moment. So I came across, I mean, if you look at the slide, you can tell it's from a children's website. And it's strange, I came across this, this image, and I found it amusing because the title says, "What do different animals give us?" And this is probably for children in kindergarten or primary school, as you can tell from the colors. And it shows that the chicken gives you meat and it gives you eggs, and the cow gives us milk, etc., or cheese. And I realized that we start the childhood, we start that education with a lie, because the animals don't give us anything. I often hear people say that cows give us milk. And I have met adults who actually think that cows lactate all their lives. I don't know if you've met people like that, but I meet people like this every now and then. And when I question them, do you know when the cow gives milk? And they say, but the cow gives milk all its life. It lactates all its life. And that's the ignorance we live with. And there's nothing we are doing to remove that ignorance either, because of our inertia. And when someone, in spite of knowing the truth, we don't want to give it up, because our attachment to our senses is so strong that we believe, or we are conditioned to believe, that we will succumb to illnesses or deficiencies if we stop consuming dairy products. And dairy products is the source of good health. The other misconception in India is that if we don't extract the milk from the mother cow or buffalo or even goat, then the mother suffers. Or if the calf is allowed to drink all the milk, it will have digestive issues. And therefore, human intervention is important for the well-being of these animals. This itself is a lie. And we do nothing. We just continue living with that lie. And in spite of sometimes, many times now that veganism has become so popular and the truth is coming out, in spite of knowing the truth, we still continue to live in that lie, which is out of inertia. And inertia is also a form of violence, because by not accepting the truth and living by that truth, we are first causing harm to our own selves, because then we end up attracting karmas accordingly. So we are violating the second law over here, that is not to lie. The third law of non-stealing. A female is only producing milk for her baby. And as nature would have it, she only produces enough for her own baby. If you heard Nirva yesterday tell us that beautiful story about that cow who gave birth to twins, and where she hid one of her calves, and she was only giving milk to her calf, and the farmer would not find any milk in the udders later on. So we know that nature produces only that much amount of milk that the baby drinks. There is no extra milk. So in order to get our supplies of the dairy products, we have to take the share of the calf, which leaves the calf hungry. And when we're leaving the calf hungry, we are violating that first law of Ahimsa again. Because remember when we said that you cannot, if you don't give the calf or the animal food and water on time, then that's violence too. And we are taking this away without the permission and without the consent of both the mother and the child. So the cow is not giving us milk voluntarily or happily. The cow is tied or she's put in rags. Her self-esteem is destroyed where she believes she has to give milk to us. In rural India, she's tricked to give milk because they will put a stuffed dead calf in front of her where she thinks her baby is there while the milkman is just milking her. So we are causing violence in those ways, and we are also stealing that milk. Because according to Bhagavati Sutra, a person taking even a grain without permission is seen as an act of stealing. And therefore, when we are taking the baby's food by force from the mother without her consent and the baby's consent, it is the act of stealing. The fourth law of celibacy. Now, a mother produces milk only when she gives birth to a child, for which she has to get pregnant. And we are constantly artificially inseminating these animals, again, against their will. And this is similar to rape. And here we violate the fourth law of brahmacharya or celibacy. I have also gone to many shelter homes in India. And when I speak to the management, I always ask them towards the end that how do your cows get pregnant? And some of them admit that they give them injections. And some of them say that they have bulls. And what is the ratio of the bull to the cows? So there might be like 150, 200, 300 cows versus just a few bulls. These few bulls are responsible to make the other cows pregnant. So neither the bull nor the cows are meeting as per their will. They are forced to do this. And while we have boundaries in our lives, but we are crossing all boundaries when it comes to these animals. And therefore, again, breaking this fourth law. And remember the law which says that if you do it directly, or whether we're doing it indirectly through someone, or if we are appreciating what they are doing, and here we are consuming that product and therefore encouraging this to happen again and again. So the fourth law is also violated here. The fifth law is of non-possession and non-attachment. All of this we are only doing because of our attachment to these products, because we want to derive pleasure from our senses, especially our taste buds. We are definitely not doing this as a favor for animals, as people say that if you don't extract the milk, the cow will suffer, or the calf, if it drinks all the milk, will have some digestive issues. It's not that we care about, because if that would be the issue, we could have still just extracted the milk and not consume it. Why do we have to consume it? And it's not that the cow is going to produce extra milk throughout. It might just be for a few days. The truth is that it's because we are attached to these products and to our senses. We are using all our efforts and all our energies only to pamper our senses. So we are constantly breeding these animals, and also not letting go of our attachment to this products it's a form of hoarding, and constantly breeding animals is also hoarding. So even the fifth law of non-possession and non-attachment is violated. Now, when we are violating all this, it's obviously going to attract certain karmas. Karma is the law of cause and effect because of our actions. And the first karma is the delusion karma, the Mohiniya karma, which creates confusion and fear, and it obstructs the right knowledge. I'll give you my example here. As I said, I was born in a vegetarian family, and I thought that one can't do more than being a vegetarian towards ahimsa. So when I learned about veganism through my in-laws, I still took a long time to go vegan. The reason being, I thought again, what will happen if I give up dairy? How will my body sustain? What will happen to my calcium? And I will get deficiencies, etc. It was, one was fear. Two, sometimes I would also tell myself, oh, but if I stop having dairy, what will happen to the cows? And this is something I hear, and I'm sure even you all have heard it if anyone lives in India, that what will happen to the cows? They will all go for slaughter. I hear this all the time, even right now. So my delusion causing karma, my confusion, my fear just did not let me accept the reality. And when I reflected upon this after I went vegan, I realized that one, it was also because of my attachment to my taste buds, because of which I didn't want to give up these products. I didn't want to make the effort to find out what are the other products I can have to substitute and make sure that I remain healthy. So I was constantly living in this fear and in this confusion. And while knowing the truth, one was the delusion causing karma did not let me accept the truth. Two, in spite of knowing the truth, I didn't do enough research out of inertia again to find a way out. And in the meantime, I'm still accumulating the karmas. And the delusion causing karma, which is the Mohiniya karma, is the most deadliest of the 8 karmas according to the Jain philosophy. By the way, in Jain philosophy, there are 8 karmas, and Mohiniya karma, or this delusion causing karma, is the most deadliest of them all, which is the culprit behind our constant cycle of birth and death. So by not accepting this reality today, in spite of seeing videos and in spite of seeing documentaries, in spite of reading, in spite of all this, if you're still not accepting it, it's only because of a delusion causing karma, and we are only attracting more of it. The second karma, in order to get all our dairy products, paneer and dahi and milk, etc., one mother and child has to be separated somewhere. And just like us, they're 5 sense beings. And remember, if we created that connection with them, then we realize what is it like to separate a mother and child. It's because we haven't created that connection. We are not able to realize that pain. We are not able to realize that they long to be with their children just the way we long to be with their children. So we are creating an obstruction in their bond. And by creating an obstruction in the bond, we are attracting karmas which will also create these kind of obstructions in our lives. And these obstruction creating karma, antaray karma, are something that we experience every now and then. There might have been times when we want to do something, we put on all our energy into it, but we still don't get the desired result, or something happens and it just stops midways. This is because of these obstruction-creating karmas that we've accumulated over time. The third one is the pain-causing karma, the Vedaniya karma. In animal agriculture, the animals are suffering their entire life for a diet, fashion, and entertainment. And their suffering is not just physical. Their suffering is emotional, it's psychological, it's mental, and physical. So they are suffering throughout their life. They're constantly living in fear and in pain. And that is why we are constantly attracting those karmas in our life, or the Vedaniya karmas in our life. And if we look around us today, we can see so many diseases and people suffering from so many physical and mental diseases. There's also so many environmental effects of this, as Dr. Tushar pointed out. And lastly, our longevity karma. Every time we are using an animal product, we are indirectly responsible for its early death. So a cow otherwise lives for around 20 to 22 years if it's just left on its own to survive. But because of the dairy industry, they don't live for more than 5 to 6 years. And therefore, we are responsible. If we are having dairy products or any of the animal products, we are responsible for impacting this longevity karma of theirs. And this will affect our longevity karma, either in this birth or in next birth. Yeah, and finally, I want to say that we went through the gross and the subtle violence. So in animal agriculture, as you can see, there is gross as well as subtle violence. There is the final killing, there's physical suffering, but there's also suffering happening at the subtle level of emotions, psychological. There's fear, because animals, if you see in their eyes, when they see the human coming, there's fear in their eyes. And we don't want to see that fear. Rather, we've not made that connection, and that is why we cannot see that fear. If I have to define Ahimsa again, it's a fundamental principle forming the cornerstone of ethics and doctrine of Jainism. It means non-violence, non-injury, and absence of desire to form any life forms. It is not just a theory about life, but a way of living. And the definition of vegan is philosophy and way of living which seeks to exclude, as far as possible, all forms of exploitation of and cruelty to animals for food, clothing, and other purpose. So we can see that veganism is stressing more on gross ahimsa, while ahimsa is a more wholesome definition which speaks about violence from every point of view, like the smallest atom to something that's as large as space, so causing ultimate killing, to psychologically creating fear in animals. And also the other things, we saw the 6 forms of body. Again, we are so used to just seeing the killing of the animal, but we don't realize that the product, the way it's come, it has caused harm to every form of body while coming as a final product. So if it is dairy, it has polluted the land, it has polluted the water and overused water, as we saw in the slides of Dr. Tushar. It has, there's deforestation happening, because of which 2 and 5 sense beings are going extinct. So there's violence happening right from 1 sense being to 6 sense being. And that is what Ahimsa focuses on. It is telling us that minimize your violence to just the smallest form of life, that is 1 sense being, which is important for your survival. Anything beyond that, we don't need it in order to survive. We can do without those products. We can find healthier products, and those are easily available. Honestly, we don't even need alternatives to them. It's alternatives probably is just given so that people stay away from animal products. But honestly, we don't even need an alternative to dairy. There is enough sources, as Dr. Gina and Asha and Dr. Tushar said, where we can get our protein and calcium from, and we don't need to consume any of these animal products. And finally, something that Gandhi said, that ahimsa is, it's impossible for an imperfect man to grasp the whole of that essence. It's just too much to bear its full place. And that is why when people say that ahimsa needs to evolve and accept veganism, or veganism is the modern concept of ahimsa, I feel ahimsa by itself is wholesome. It speaks about every form of life. It's just that probably we are evolving and we are learning more about it, because it is very difficult to practice the whole of ahimsa in our lives. We won't be able to bear it. We won't be able to survive. But ahimsa was perfect the way it was 2,500 years back. And it is just the way it is even today. Whether it's veganism or any other concept, ahimsa always included that. And Jainism always included those concepts. We just have to apply it. We have to read in between the lines and apply it in our lives. We just have to hold back and question, where did this come from? Was there any violence caused while coming before it reached to me? Was there unnecessary violence caused? Is this something that I really require to survive? These are some of the questions we need to ask. We need to step out of our inertia. We need to accept self-restraint, which is our stepping stone towards ahimsa. And this is how we can start practicing ahimsa in a small way by staying away from gross violence. And lastly, I read this in a book called Mahavir Vani, and I just translated it in English, that till we do not focus on ahimsa, the world will not be a beautiful place. Life will not evolve. And by life, we mean the life from the 6 forms of body, and the environment cannot be protected. And we can see that today. Thank you.
Ruchika, thank you so much for a presentation that many folks in the Q&A have been complimenting. And you seem to have also been very efficient, and we have time for Q&A. If that's okay, we can send some of the questions that have come up. So maybe one of the questions that came up in the last topic was about the misinformation about dairy. Somebody had asked if it was limited to the US, and I believe one of our Jain Vegan Initiative board members had answered. But from your perspective, are there forces in India that continue to promote misinformation about dairy products? And why are things seeming to go in both the direction of some adopting veganism and some adopting the pattern of more and more consumption?
Gina, we are just so conditioned to believe that whatever happened in history, or whatever happened in the past, or what some great saints did is the right thing, and that is what we should be doing. So we don't tend to question what is happening today. We don't want to accept that reality today. People will argue saying that, but Bhagwan Mahavir, who was the spiritual leader, consumed dairy. Now, these are stories. We don't know if those are true. But at the same time, Mahavir said, stay away from vegan. So I often think that was Mahavir confused that he would tell people, stay away from vegan, but have dairy himself? Would that be the case? Or is it our interpretation? So people are just very conditioned. They want to live by what happened in the past. So that's the reason why they don't want to challenge authority sometimes. And the fear, it's also the fear, I guess. They don't want to take this step out of fear. So that's the reason why people don't accept. But yes, there are many, many Jains who do say that this entire veganism is a conspiracy to get rid of our cattle. And if we stop having dairy, the cows will go to slaughter. As I said, I thought the same till I came to the reality that, this is not true. And actually, I went vegan because when I was feeding my daughter and some milk came on my hand and I saw that the milk of the cow and my milk looked the same, that's when I created the connection with the cow. And that's what helped me give up dairy products. So somewhere we have to create that connection. We have to accept what's reality. And sometimes we have to question that maybe it happened in the past, but it is not correct today.
Yes. And we know that you've actually had conversations with ascetics, the sadhus and sadhvis and Digambar ascetics in India, other sects as well. There was a question about how to convince our religious leaders, and we heard from one of the other speakers. I think yesterday Nirva was speaking about sadhu that she heard in India that was speaking about veganism. So there are some that are advocating for veganism. What is your experience on the ones that accept veganism? Has something touched their heart, or what is the way to communicate that has been most effective in promoting change among our religious leaders? Oh, and Richard, could you stop sharing screen? Just hit stop share.
Sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
There we go.
So one thing is that I realized is never question the authority. So, go with respect, ask them, this is what is happening. Do you think we should be consuming it? So now sadhus have come to a point where they do admit that, yes, the process is entirely wrong. What is happening is entirely wrong, and this is not how it should happen. They, however, still say the product is not bad, but the process is bad. We need to improve how we derive this. So there are certain sadhus who agree that veganism is the right way. Unfortunately, not many of them speak publicly because it's because of the society, because the way it's structured, that they are not able to speak openly about this. While the rest of them still think it's a conspiracy, they agree the process is bad and the process needs to change, but they are somewhere still midway. They're still not accepting the truth completely. They're not able to go vegan. And I think it's the entire structure that's over here, because of which till the highest authorities don't start speaking about it, their disciples are not able to, even if they agree to this, they are not able to practice it. And it did happen with one of the Jain sadhus who had come to meet Chitrabhanuji at home, and then he went vegan. He spoke about it extensively, even in public. But finally, he had to stop speaking about it because the authorities were not accepting it. But slowly and gradually, I think as a community and as youngsters will go and talk about this and talk about the violence and just question them, how does this align with the Jain philosophy? Somewhere they will have to come in terms. It's a matter of time, but they will have to come in terms with this.
We've definitely seen movement over the past several decades. There was a time when no one was speaking about it. A few courageous voices have been.
They wouldn't even admit that, there's something wrong with it. Today, they admit that the process is completely wrong and there is so much cruelty happening.
Yeah. But
the Jain community is very dairy heavy. I mean, and especially during Paryushan, you will see they're so dairy heavy, like everything that they make is with dairy. I hope and I urge Jains to try be going vegan for 8 days. There's a vegan Paryushan cookbook. There's also another cookbook for everyday cooking called the Rainbow
Rainbow Food for the Vegan Planet.
Yes, for the vegan palate.
It's wonderful. Yeah, and the difference is, of course, in Paryushan.
It's Jain and it's vegan.
Exactly. The difference is simply that the rainbow food includes fruits and vegetables, which are generally good for health. And the Paryushan cookbook is meant for a very limited time when we would exclude those items as well. But they both exclude roots and they're both vegan.
Yes. So the rainbow one is good for everyday cooking.
Exactly.
And it's simple. It's really, really simple. Indian food by itself in many ways is just naturally vegan. We just have to replace the ghee or the clarified butter with oil. Paneer is anyways not our staple diet. Honestly, It's more in the north. It came from Sindh, from Pakistan. It's just got into our diet now. And as I said, it's only because of taste, more than anything.
There was a
So-
question about, can Jains keep pets?
That's a good question. It's a little tricky question, right? Because in India, I mean, otherwise the stray dogs many times are abused or they get killed. So maybe in order to save them, it's good to take a risk. It's good to have a rescued pet rather than buying a pet. Buying a pet is definitely a no-no. But otherwise, I'm not too sure if one should keep a pet. If you can feed the strays around you, if they can have their freedom, if they can have the shelter, then it's good to just, leave them. But if one wants to have a pet, then please take a rescued one or a stray dog and not buy a pet. Sure.
It seems almost like if you have a rescue animal, it's a small scale version of a sanctuary, which we
Yes,
Jains
yes.
are very
Absolutely.
historically.
So you're doing it out of compassion, right? You're doing it out of compassion. The intention matters. You're doing it in order to save that animal out of compassion. Then yes, absolutely.
And
so
I
there
know
are many
that's-
people who are doing that. And
Yeah,
that's great.
I think Sunny, I'm not sure if he's able to speak. He's one of our panelists. Sunny certainly has experience with that, and perhaps others as well. So yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And a couple of questions are going on about, somebody was also offering that there's vegan pet food for dogs who are rescues also. So you can even find the vegan pet food. And I suppose in India, they
Right.
eat everything. They'll eat,
There
all
is
kinds
vegan
of-
pet food as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they do. A lot of people, I mean, a lot of Jains or vegetarians who have pets at home, they're just given normal home food. I don't know whether it's healthy. I have no knowledge about what pets should be eating, but I know that they're just given normal food.
Yeah. Tell us about what you see as the vegan movement's evolution in India. You've organized Ahimsa Fest. You're in touch with many of the groups. Tell us about how you see things evolving in India. And if people are
Well-
interested, some people are asking, how do I get involved? How do I bring materials to my contacts in India?
So veganism in India has grown over the last few years. 2016, when we did the first Ahimsa Fest, people didn't know what vegan was. I think late 2018 to early 2019 onwards, it literally exploded. And there is so much awareness about veganism because there are days when we go for activism. And while we're talking to people about animal cruelty, they tell us, so the best thing is to go vegan. So there was a time when we were telling people what vegan is. Now we have people telling us when we're explaining to them about animal cruelty, saying that, okay, so the solution is to go vegan. So veganism is growing very fast in India. And the good thing about veganism is that it's not religion driven, right? It's compassion driven. So people from various religions, various backgrounds, and this is across the world, whether you're following Islam or you're following Christianity or Buddhism, Jainism, or any part of India, people are just joining in this movement, and they're actively promoting. That's one thing about vegans, right? Then they can't hold it to themselves. They definitely want to actively promote that. These people are actively promoting, going out, doing activism every week to different places. So there's a lot of awareness. A lot of restaurants have started giving separate vegan menus, have vegan options. There are many, many vegan products. The good thing in India is that people can start homegrown businesses. There are many homegrown businesses here. The large industries now getting into vegan options. So there are certain meat companies, meat processing companies, which have also started making mock meats because they do see a future in there. So there is a huge change in, people's thinking.
There's a couple of questions.
Game changers, Nirva, if you're there, game changers played a huge impact on people. And I think it was during COVID or something, and a lot of people then tried going vegan after seeing that movie.
Yeah,
So that
it's funny,
movie brought a lot of change.
Ruchika, when you said 2018, 19, I kind of was hoping that the Game Changers was part of that revolution. So I'm so glad.
Yes, it definitely was. It definitely was. I have friends who told me that, we watched Game Changers and then we tried being vegan for some time. They, of course, went back. There are many people who continue being, but that was a huge, it brought a huge mind shift.
Right.
Thank you for that.
It's amazing how much some of the global media has an effect around the world, right? Like, I don't know if people would have been able to predict that something like the Game Changers would create such an awareness in India.
Yeah, it was huge.
Yeah. I think because it was based on the principle of empowerment, right? And it wasn't judgmental, and they didn't talk about the cruelty behind the vegan movement. They focused on results, and it
Right.
was just so empowering to watch. Like, you just wanted to be there. And I think we all have that. It also focused on an older population of athletes that wanted to get back into things or maintain that level of prominence. So it was hopeful, like very hopeful. And then at the end, they had a bit about the cruelty aspect when they had a little blurb from Damien Monder, who's the CEO of the International Anti-Poaching Foundation, and he talked about how he saves all these big rhinos and elephants and animals in Africa, but then he's eating meat, and he said that just doesn't make any sense. And so they tied in all of that as well, but they didn't make it the foundational principle.
Right. It was very positive, right? It didn't make people go on a guilt trip. It didn't make them feel guilty. It was a very, very positive documentary, and that's why I think that positiveness is what makes a huge impact. Like, even when you speak to people, if you make them feel guilty, the first thing is self-defense, right? They want to defend themselves. But if you bring out the positive aspects of this, people want to hear more.
Well said.
Yeah.
And a very fitting conclusion to this session. So thank you so much, Ruchika, for your presentation and for the Q&A, and Nirva for chiming in. Really appreciate that, and all your contributions with the Game Changers and others. And we're going to take a break for a few more minutes, and we'll return with the last panel, which will really help us in terms of a vision of our future. The organizations that have been instrumental in putting this on will be giving voice to what they do and what you can do. So be back in a few minutes.
Yeah, Janendra, everyone, and thank you so much for staying with us throughout this entire conference. We've had such great conversations and questions from the audience. We realize there's so many that we're trying to answer and keep up with, and our moderators and participants are trying to keep up with your wonderful questions. So please keep those coming. This last panel that we have is called A Vision of the Future, Advancing Ahimsa in Practice. And what we really want to do is highlight some of the work that each of our organizations are doing who have contributed to the creation of this conference. And I am Dr. Christopher Jane Miller from Arihanta Institute. I'm a professor and academic here, and I teach courses, as you'll see, across many different levels. And I'm also going to be joined here by the Jain Vegan Initiative, the Ahimsa Vegan Committee at Jaina, as well as Compassionate Living, all of whom made such an integral contribution to organizing this conference, and it would not have been possible without this wonderful collaboration that we have all had together. So thank you all in the audience as well for making this what it was. We had about 500 people registered for this conference, astonishing, and people have been coming in and out, and the recordings will be available soon after. So what I want to talk to you about is a little bit about Arihanta Institute, what brought me here, and how you can learn about Ahimsa and many of the things that we've been talking about with regard to animal advocacy and veganism. My own journey through veganism, or to becoming vegan, was very transformative. I had been a vegetarian for a very long time as a result of the influence of the Jain community and my own yoga studies as well. And I also, one summer, 2019, before the pandemic, we've been talking about the summer of 2019, when Game Changers came out, a few things happened. I was intensely preparing a undergraduate course in Jain studies, deeply studying Jain philosophy, Ahimsa, and all the things, parallel things that are connected with that. and was feeling like, is vegetarianism enough? I was asking myself this question. And at the same time that summer, the Jain vegans in the UK were doing their Give Up Dairy for Paryushan campaign, which we've heard about, asking people to at least give up dairy for Paryushan and to maybe commit to going vegan as a result of that. And that same summer, the Game Changers came out, and I watched the Game Changers. I was really influenced by that. And it's only recently that I found out that Nirva Patel, a Jain, was the executive producer of that film. So as you can see, the Jain influence is widespread. It sometimes is in our face and we're hearing about it and we see it. And at other times there are people working behind the scenes. And so there's a lot of different ways that we come to becoming vegan, and education is one of those priorities and one of those ways that this can happen. And so we hope that this conference has been that for you. And at Arihanta Institute, that's exactly what we're trying to do: educate people so that they can make the best choices for themselves and for society. So our vision here at Arihanta Institute, we are a nonprofit 501c3 educational nonprofit institution, okay? Our vision, as you see, is that Jain philosophy and practice, which we've brought together in this conference, will become more widely known, appreciated, and adopted through enhanced and accessible education in Jain teachings and practice. We are fundamentally an online institution. You may meet me in certain places at certain times around the world if I'm visiting a Jain center or something like that. And I love to meet Jains all around the world. I just came back from London, for example, at the new Colindale Jain Center opening, which was a wonderful thing. But most all of our educational activities are taking place here online, accessible, democratized, and we do indeed have students from all over the globe. Our institution is founded on Jain principles, and as well as on the vision of Acharya Sushil Kumar, who you see pictured here, and this is a picture from our website, who really had this vision to create these temples of learning. And our co-founder, president, and CEO, Dr. Parveen Jain, was a very close follower of Acharya Sushil Kumar, and his vision for bringing Jain wisdom around the world is really what we're trying to do here to make the world a better place. You can learn more about that vision at our website. Now, as you've seen here, we are focusing on animal advocacy and veganism in this particular event that we're holding. But Arihanta Institute has 6 learning areas. And I think what you got to hear is a good taste of how we work in one of our learning areas, which is animal advocacy and biodiversity. But we have 6 learning areas, and I'm going to go over all of them with you right now. Jain philosophy, history, and anthropology is the first one. You can have this really intensive experience of Jain philosophy and tradition. Climate change and environment, animal advocacy and biodiversity, professional ethics, yoga, self-care, and spirituality, and of course, social justice. So we have these 6 learning areas. And what we're really trying to do is bring the Jain tradition into conversation with some of the biggest questions and issues and challenges of our day, ultimately to educate people to make the world a better place. It's our nonprofit mission to really try to democratize these teachings and bring them into conversation with all of these issues. So for example, I'll talk about animal advocacy and biodiversity first of our 6 learning areas, which is really what this program that we've been doing here has been directed towards helping us understand better. And what it really does is it brings current issues surrounding animals and biodiversity loss into conversation with Jain approaches. I don't think I have to explain what that is because we've seen it happening here, right? We've seen Jain responses, Jain principles, Jain values being applied and engaged with particular issues of our time with regard to the way that we treat animals and the effect of our relationship with animals on the environment, on society, and on, of course, the animals themselves. And so this is what we try to teach in the animal advocacy and biodiversity learning area, where we have many courses. I'll show you some in a moment. We also have climate change and environment, something we've been talking about today. This is another learning area that is of high interest and high value in society right now. There's so much going on with climate change. It's rapidly advancing, as we saw in Gina Shah's presentation today, faster than we imagined. Dr. Gina Shah had mentioned that, Dr. Tushar Mehta had talked a bit about it. And what we do here in climate change and environment courses is try to bring current issues surrounding climate change, environmental pollution, into conversation with Jain approaches and responses to teach people how to be in the world in a better way, to think better in a better way, in alignment with climate science and pollution science, but also in alignment with Jain principles, because Jain principles have a lot to offer us when we think about nonviolence, reducing our consumption, thinking about the ways that we travel. These are all really important points that the Jain tradition brings, and they've been there for centuries. And so they help us rethink ways, better choices we can make in this regard. Now, there's 3 ways of learning with us. Those are 2 of our learning areas that I think are most applicable to what we're doing right now. But there are 3 different ways you can learn with us to learn about these different things. You can do it through self-study on our website, where we have a lot of courses that are not very expensive and very robust, taught from experts around the world. You can take live courses with us, and you can take graduate level education with us. And so I've taken a screenshot here from our website, self-paced online learning courses. We have a lot of self-paced online learning courses. You can go through any of these learning areas and find a course that will be interesting to you. Here you see just 3 pictured that you could take. And I'll also provide a coupon code for people if they want for a short time to take 50% off of a course. These are not being sold at extraordinary prices. You know, if you apply the discount code, it will cost around $49 US. And if anyone needs a scholarship and you really have financial difficulties, you can reach out to me, reach out to us, and let us know, because our goal is to educate you. We also have live online learning courses, and these ones I really want to highlight right now, because these are ones that are coming up this fall right after Paryushan. So if you're committing this year during Paryushan to educate yourself, to learn more about the Jain tradition, and you want to do it in a live setting, each of these 4 courses here are really, really for you. So there are 2 for Jain youth. So for all the parents out there, they want their children to learn more like in a Patshala kind of style, and they don't have access to Patshala maybe. You see courses 107 and 108, Introduction to Agas Ashram, and then the Essence of Jainism, the 16 Bhavanas. These are made for people who are 18 and under, and they would be wonderful for children. People were asking about courses for their children and education for their children. And then we also have an adults course, a couple of adults courses, course 109, Dashlakshan Dharma, to follow as a Jain. So thinking about Dashlakshan and Paryushan, Dinesh Jain in Chicago is going to be teaching this live course for you on Saturdays. And we also have Manoj Jain teaching a course, Jain Path to the Jain Way of Living, for the 2nd time, which was a wonderful and well-received course in the previous semester. So these are adult level courses, 109 and 103 that you see down there. And I highly encourage you to enroll in one of these. In addition to our self-study, our live online learning, our 3rd level of education that we have here at Arihanta Institute is graduate level education. So we actually have a graduate degree in collaboration with our partner, Claremont School of Theology in Southern California. This is remotely available, so you can study with us online. You will see all of the professors that you see below here and have spoken in this conference there, and you will learn with us. And in fact, starting tomorrow, we are launching our first full semester with our graduate students. And I know some of them are here, and I'm so happy that you joined and you've been chatting and putting stuff in the Q&A. So we're really happy to launch this program, and I'm loving all the emojis flying up right now, because that's how I feel inside, because we've been working on this for a long time. And we put together a program that gets you a master's degree, and you get to study Jain tradition philosophically, historically, anthropologically, but you get to learn, most importantly, how to engage and apply these principles in everyday life. So you're going to read some of the best scholarship, some of it being produced by our own faculty in Jain studies, and you're going to get to learn how to really make yourself and make your spiritual life better for yourself, make the world a better place, all of these things combined. This is the first of its kind program outside of India, and it is really one of a kind in North America and Europe. So we still have perhaps a few scholarships. If anyone's interested in applying for this program, reach directly out to me and I can tell you more about it. And I should also mention that you're not just studying with the 3 of us here. If you study in this program, you're also studying with Professor Venu Mehta. She is at Claremont School of Theology, a wonderful professor of Jain studies. And you're also studying with other faculty at Claremont School of Theology in allied fields of inquiry, like interreligious dialogue is a major component. How do we make peace between different religious traditions? How do we speak to one another across traditions? And of course, the Jain tradition has a lot to bring to that conversation with regards to things like Anekantavada and other Jain principles that really emphasize this kind of interreligious conversation. while allowing others to maintain their positions without having to convert people to a religious tradition. So all this will be available through our graduate program. Here's a scholarship code, AI Enroll 23. If anybody wants to take one of these courses for really, it's less than $50 to take one of these courses. And I'm showing you some of our courses in animal advocacy and biodiversity. There's Ahimsa Animal Advocacy and Veganism taught by Hope Bohanec, who we heard from so far across this event, and who is a central organizer at Compassionate Living. And then we also have a course by the Jain Vegan Initiative, Beyond Vegetarianism, Jain Veganism and the Promotion of Ahimsa, by Pratik Bansali, who is here, Sunny Jain, who is here, and Nisha Mehta, who is also here and has been helping to create this conference. This conference really emerges out of all the collaborative work that we've been doing in these courses. And there's a lot of this information and answers to your questions that you've been asking in the Q&A in these courses. So if you want to take one, these are self-study courses. You can take them on your own pace, and they're on our website. Again, there's the coupon code if anyone wants to take it. There's also another course that I teach on Jain Dharma and animal advocacy, if you want to get a taste of what we do here at Arihanta Institute. And then Professor Jonathan Dickstein, who we heard from yesterday, teaches a course on Jain approaches to animal sentience. Question in the Jain tradition that gets brought up a lot. It's questions of sentience. And he brings it into relationship with science, the science of our day. There's another course that we have still on our website that doesn't cost anything. And we offered this course in collaboration with our partners at Museum Rietberg here in Zurich, who did the major Jain exhibition recently. And this course is offered at no fees. It's a 6-hour course, Jain responses to climate change. It brings climate science into conversation with Jain principles and shows how by living the Jain way of life, we can reduce our karmic and climate impact on ourselves and on the world around us, and makes these direct connections between climate science and the Jain tradition. So that's all I really wanted to share with you. I should bring myself down below here and say Jai Jinendra, and I wish you all the best. I thank you all for coming to our conference and look forward to speaking with many of you soon. And I want to thank all of our collaborators. And I am now going to turn it over to the Jain Vegan Initiative, one of our wonderful collaborators who you will hear from now. Jai Jinendra.
Wonderful. Jai Jinendra, everyone. My name is Sunny Jain, and I'll be speaking on behalf of the Jain Vegan Initiative. Firstly, I just want to thank all the organizers and all the attendees for being a part of this incredible experience. I think in these last 2 days, I've personally learned so much, and I'm sure a lot of others have as well. And so, for the next 15 minutes, I'm going to be discussing who we are as the Jain Vegan Initiative, our vision, and how you can get involved in ongoing conversations in trying to push the needle towards veganism in the Jain community. So what is the Jain Vegan Initiative? So the Jain Vegan Initiative is an umbrella organization that was founded in September 2021. So this was right before Patrician, during the midst of the pandemic. And it's a global collective of like-minded Jains with the mission to push the needle towards veganism in the global Jain community. With an increasing awareness of how our food systems tie to the mass exploitation of animals, our planet, and our health, we believe that the collective shift towards veganism is the single biggest and most important moment in contemporary Jain culture. And as I kind of present a little bit more about our organization, you'll see some posts that we have made on the side, which is kind of an ongoing theme of our organization, is we try to create original content that we introduce to the Jain community by the Jain community. And so you'll continue to see that throughout our presentation. Why do we exist? In the 21st century, we believe that there's a stark disconnect between Jain principles and modern day practice. This social acceptance of the use and exploitation of 5-cent animals in the Jain community is in complete contrast with the Jain principles due to the violence inflicted on the animals involved, as Jainism prescribes that we should minimize the suffering we cause to all beings, of course, which we went into great detail in these last few days. And we believe that it's our imperative as Jains that our community reacts and adjusts as new information becomes available. So as we learn more about what is really happening in the animal agriculture industry, that we also as a community modernize certain practices and change the way we look. On the left, you'll actually see that we've made a few posts about common questions that we often get. How do you drink vegan chai? Should I choose a Jain diet or a vegan diet? Which we purposely made as a dichotomy, which really is not, the answer isn't really one or the other. It's, you can do both. And just various posts that we have made on our social media pages. One thing that makes the Jain Vegan Initiative unique is we are actively participating in community-based activism. And so why is that? We believe that if we target a specific community, we understand the community. There's an existing social structure. There are derasers, there's Pathshala teachers, there's the Jain community, there's monks, there's the Jain umbrella organization. And so we kind of understand the existing social hierarchy. And now that we have the existing structure, we can begin to think about strategies on how we can begin to push awareness and education to these organizations. We believe that there's also so much overlap between veganism and Jain Ahimsa, and that if we appeal to the Jain audience using these specific conversation and talking points, that will have a higher adoption rate as well. What differentiates us? We're a separate, independent entity, and we kind of pride ourselves in that, in the sense that we aren't influenced by any organizations or donors. No one can really tell us that, hey, don't say this. This will offend someone. For us, our goal is to present whatever we can for the benefit of animals, and I think that's something that really makes us different. I think in addition to that, our proficiency in social media and digital marketing, our readiness to leverage new technologies. So as the world continues to evolve and change, we're always trying to find new ways to kind of make our message effective and clear. And then finally, our global reach. So, we try to transcend physical boundaries. I think with the advent of COVID, the more adoption of Zoom and different technologies, we're able to reach people that we couldn't prior to those years. The 2023 JVI Advisory Board, you'll probably see a lot of familiar faces. This is something that we pride ourselves in. We have a leadership board of very different people. We have people from different cities, different ages. A few notable stats is we have people from at least 7 different cities. We have 2 physicians, 5 parents. We have 3 food bloggers. We have 4 entrepreneurs, and we have 5 cooking enthusiasts, as well as 4 Jaina committee members. So I'm really proud of our board and everything we've done so far. And I appreciate that we're able to come to the table with different perspectives. And I think none of us have the exact same views, but we all have the same vision of trying to help animals within the Jain community. So community events, I just want to highlight a few great events that we've hosted. I think one of our first major flagship events, it was a virtual event we had on Clubhouse, which is a audio-based version of Zoom. And it was, why are so many Jains talking about veganism? And so just in this table alone, we have 10 different vegans talking, from different backgrounds, ages, countries, talking about why they went vegan. So we gave everyone a 5-minute time slot to talk about their story. And it was just such an incredible event. And it was just really enlightening to see how everyone found veganism from a different story, different perspective, different journey. Not everything was very straightforward. Some people did it for health reasons, and then they learned about the animal welfare reasons as well. Some people did it for environment, and then others did it through religious or spiritual means. And of course, with every great event, we have a part 2 to it. So we did this once again, got 10 more different Jains on the panel, and did the exact same thing where we asked everyone to speak 5 minutes about why they went vegan as well. And so a common theme you're starting to see is that veganism is starting to really grow and scale within the Jain community. This is something that more and more Jains are starting to talk about every day. And I think this is kind of a testament to these changes that are happening in our community. We also have hosted many physical events. So this is actually our first physical event we've ever held, which was in New York City. So, it was a great event. We, essentially said that, hey, we want to have a Jain vegan meetup at a vegan restaurant. You don't have to be vegan, but, this is, obviously for like-minded people, and we welcome all of you to join us. And so, many different people came, people of all ages, and it just was such a wonderful event and something that we want to continue to have around the world. This was actually held in Dallas. So a very similar event. It was a Jain vegan event, a meetup in Dallas at a vegan restaurant as well. So we have kids, parents hanging out together. We have people of various ages, and we have older people that are retired as well that were a part of this great event. This was actually a Jain vegan meetup we had in Mumbai. And so this was led by Ruchika, as well as many other volunteers, where they did an activist event. So they did outreach where they held different signs, and they essentially engaged with the community on discussing if we should make changes to our behavior, and kind of having these like very difficult dialogues, which ended up with the outcome of people reconsidering their current behaviors that may affect animals in a negative way. This was actually a Jain Vegan meetup we did in London as well. So we had a few wonderful volunteers that helped us in organizing this. And as you can see, we had a great attendance over there as well. So the Jain Vegan community in London is like a group that we hold dearly and we're just really grateful for. This was in Toronto, Canada. So once again, trying to like kind of emphasize our outreach beyond just certain physical boundaries. This is actually an event that we held without any local representatives there. We essentially had a virtual space on WhatsApp, and we kind of did the organization there. I personally called the restaurant and booked the reservations, and then people attended. And so we were able to facilitate events with us not even being there. So a really cool thing. Finally, we're working with other organizations such as Young Jain Professionals and Young Jains of America, and trying to not just have our own events, but influencing existing Jain events. That, hey, instead of having an event at a mixed restaurant, perhaps have it at a vegan restaurant, which will at least allow people to have exposure to vegan food. And so in the background, you can see the Go Vegan sign, and you can see how many people attended. And I don't even think this is a full group photo. I think there's more like on the back, so just an incredible event. And for those that aren't familiar, Young Jain Professionals, is essentially ages 24 to around 42. So this is like a very specific niche age group, and they all had vegan food that day. So really grateful for that. A few notable projects that our organization has really just spearheaded and we're really proud of. The first one is the Vegan Production Cookbook. We have found just historically that many Jains that are vegan today actually did it during Production, which is our religious week of fasting, 1 to 2 weeks where Jains engage in fasting, self-reflection, spiritual enhancement. And we found that a lot of people, have tried going vegan during this period of time and actually ended up staying vegan afterward. So Production is obviously a very important time for us when it comes to like our targeted activism. And we created this cookbook, which was over 120 pages of countless different recipes, which abide by both the Production dietary guidelines, as well as keeping it vegan as well. So there are no animal products. This is for free download, which we have, through the gracious donation of various donors, we've been able to design it using a professional designer, had these foods tested with photos on every page. And this has been circulated digitally and is free for download even to this day. Some really cool analytics that we're really proud of. We actually put in some money into digital marketing, and we've actually reached 290,000 people on Instagram, with the majority of these people within the Indian community. We like to think a lot of them within the Jain community. And so we did targeted marketing, and from that 8,000 downloads just from Instagram alone, not to include the many downloads from various email distribution lists that were passed out from various Jain organizations, including Jaina and the Vegan Jains organization. And we've actually had 30,000 emails sent out, providing this cookbook to others as well. I think what was really great is we presented this cookbook as a free for download. There was no other intention, just to provide education and awareness that if you're Jain, that you can have access to recipes and you can eat a Jain vegan diet during Production. And then, we've also had at least 100 different give up dairy bachkans. So we ask people to just make a commitment, just a checkbox online that you're going to try to give up dairy or substitute dairy to non-dairy alternatives just during those few weeks. So really great stats. Another great initiative is, the YJA, Young Jains America, have biannual conventions every 2 years. And the 2022 YJA convention actually went fully vegan. They provided vegan food, breakfast, lunch, dinner for over 700 different attendees. This was various cuisines. It was Italian food, Mexican food. Every meal had dessert. There were snacks throughout the day, and just everything was vegan, all the way up to the shampoo in the hotel rooms for those that stayed on convention campus. So really great stuff. We don't take this credit personally, but we do believe that we were part of those conversations to try to push that forward. And of course, we want to continue to have these conversations for conventions going forward. Finally, we want to kind of just highlight the Arihanta Academy, collaborative project that we've had with them on the Beyond Vegetarianism course. We just want to emphasize that all proceeds will be donated to Jeevdaya, and this is a wonderful course that a lot of time was put into it. And we just appreciate anyone that has time to kind of take a look into this. It's a 6-week course, that shares a lot about what was discussed today in additional detail. Finally, just in the interest of time, I want to share really quickly, how do we plan to accomplish these goals? So we have a very laid out plan, and I'm not going to go into specific detail on what our vision is, but I just want to kind of give everyone a taste of what we're doing to accomplish these goals, what actions we're taking, as well as how you can get involved. So, we have a clear stated vision statement, which is we create spaces and content to support vegan activism and push the needle towards veganism in the global Jain community. So, again, just to rephrase that, we create spaces and original content to push veganism in the Jain community. So how can we actually do that? We have 5 bubbles right here in which we believe are different spaces where we can kind of push this vision. We understand this is a very large and broad vision, but with the help of volunteers and contributors, we believe we can achieve this as veganism continues to gain momentum in our community. The first one is a centralized website. So we want to have a Jain Vegan website, which already exists, continue to enhance it, where if you want to find recipes, vegan Jain resources that are kind of tailored towards the vegan community, as well as articles, blog posts, contributors from various Jain leaders, vegan leaders in the Jain community, and kind of highlight those on a centralized website, which we do have, which we'll post in our chat and continue to host. The second thing that we want to do is we want to hold actual virtual events. So this is in the form of panel-based events as well as support events. Panel-based events being events such as this one, where we have speakers and tailored agendas, as well as support events where maybe we have an open space. You can just come on the stage, the virtual stage, and ask questions, and maybe someone's there to help you out. There's so many different topics, as you learned just from these last 2 days, whether it's like the transition into veganism, whether we're talking about environmentalism, sustainability, plant-based fitness, cooking, the veganism and Jain Dharma, maybe even just watching documentaries together, talking about it. So there's really just so much there, and it's not just really a diet at that point. Another major bubble for us to achieve our goal is our social media pages. So we have a very large social media base that we've been growing for the last 3 years, which is essentially on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. And essentially, we're using every digital platform to reach different groups of people, as different parts of the Jain community will use different social media pages. And we want to use these, pages to highlight speaker quotes. So if someone says something that is quoted in one of our sessions, we want to kind of like document that, make sure that it's there for others to see, create original content, such as how to drink vegan chai, right? And maybe we can give a 6-page blurb on different ways people have drinking vegan chai, whether it's with oat milk, whether it's with cashew milk, or various different milks. Bloggers, initiative spotlight. So if there's any great things happening in the vegan space and Jain community, we want to highlight that, as well as post event flyers. Finally, just 2 more bubbles. The networking groups are essentially what we have on WhatsApp and Telegram. These are 24/7 support groups where you can just jump in the conversation, ask questions, or you can be someone that can help others if they have questions, depending on where you are in the transition. Also, social and professional networking. So we want to, give rise to those that are interested in and developing businesses that are value aligned, as well as finally, just really a way for us to support each other. Because I think when you're surrounded by like-minded people, it is just easier to be solidified in your beliefs. So it's something that, really helps a lot of us, is being with our people, essentially. Finally, and I think I guess arguably the most important is the vegan outreach aspect of this. This is essentially the end goal for us, is to eventually have vegan outreach events, whether it's building flyers, brochures, sending emails to different Jain leaders with just educational awareness and packages, or having physical events, which is like these Jain meetups. Maybe during Mahavir Jayanti or Pradyushan, we'll have like these booths where we can talk about, hey, try this instead of this, and this is why, doing it maybe in a non-confrontational way, and collaborating with other Dhyasa youth groups. And so that's essentially our vision for the Jain Vegan Initiative. I know that was a lot to unpack, but really for us, our goal was to show that there's a lot of ways you can get involved and be a part of our organization, no matter what your strengths are or whatever you're good at. Whether you just want to like support and just subscribe, there's many ways you can do that. I do want to, pass the mic to, Pratik as well. Pratik, if you want to share any thoughts about how you can get involved or anything that may have missed, and then we'll kind of go into the Q&A.
Yeah, I think Sunny, you have covered a lot of what I want to say anyways. So that's good. I guess like one important thing is we always need local representatives, local people who can again organize stuff or help us translate some of the content in local languages, Indian languages, Hindi, Marathi, Gujarati, South and other North Indian languages. And again, also trying to reach out to communities outside North America, Europe, and India. So I guess that's one important aspect. So yeah, if anyone, whether you're a vegan, whether you're not a vegan, please feel free to, if you are connected to any other organization, which is not even a Jain organization, do definitely reach out, and we're always up for collaborating with everyone as long as they are aligned with the principles. Yeah, that's most of what I want to say, Sunny, and I would like to leave some room for questions and answers.
Thank you so much, Sunny, and thank you to the Jain Vegan Initiative, Pratik Bansal, as well as Nisha Mehta, who's also here from the Jain Vegan Initiative. So before we go into the Q&A, we have one more talk from our collaborator and colleague, Hope Bohannic at Compassionate Living, who will now go, and then we'll come back to the Q&A. Anyone who wants any question to type any questions, please do. But thank you. Round of applause for Jain Vegan Initiative, our wonderful collaborator, and we'll be hearing from Hope Bohannic now.
Thank you, Chris. Wonderful. So my co-panelist is my husband, Jain Bohannic, and I think he's going to attempt to share screen and show the slides that we have. So my name is Hope Bohannic. I am the executive director of Compassionate Living, and Jain Bohannic, my husband, is the strategic advisor of the Ahimsa Living Project, which is a project of Compassionate Living. And we're going to talk more about this. I just want to say how inspired I was by the last two presentations. We wanted to have this panel. So I'm one of the co-organizers of this event, and we wanted to have this panel because we're so often asked, and I've been doing vegan conferences for many, many years, and we're so often asked at the end, well, what can I do? What can I do to help? You know, how can I get involved? So we thought that we would give some opportunity and information about ways that you can take it further. And we got the wonderful information about education through Arihanta Institute and the Jain Vegan Initiative and all that they are doing in the UK, online around the world. It's really amazing to hear and very, very inspirational. So I'm excited also to share my vision, Jain and I's vision for our Ahimsa Living Project. But first, just to talk about, okay, that's fine. We'll go there. To talk about some of the campaigns of Compassionate Living, I have a podcast, the Hope for the Animals podcast, and actually my latest guest on the podcast was Ruchika Chitrabhanu, our keynote speaker today. So if you'd like to hear more from Ruchika, check out my podcast. Actually, several of the presenters throughout the weekend have been on the podcast, Tushar Mehta, Jain, Chris Miller. So please check out our podcast, Hope for the Animals podcast. The other project that we have is the Humane Hoax Project. And the Humane Hoax Project is, I've written actually a couple of books on the subject of humane washing, greenwashing, when we're seeing these labels, these sustainable labels on animal products, and the reality behind those labels. And I'll give just a brief example, and then we'll go on to what I really want to talk about, which is the Ahimsa Living Project. But I just feel this is really an important piece, especially from all the information that we've gotten this weekend. And Tushar did a wonderful job as well, I believe, on the humane washing aspects. And if you didn't see the presentations yesterday, Saturday's presentations, I really encourage you to watch the videos because they were just amazing. So one thing that when people are eating dairy or consuming dairy products, they'll often think that they should get organic and buy organic dairy products because they feel it's a little better, going to be a little better for the cows. But I've done extensive research on these labels, humane labels, certified humane labels, and organic. And what I found was very disheartening, and I just want to share it with you briefly. So when there's commercial dairy operations, conventional dairy operations,
the cows are very stressed. They are crowded. It's dirty. They're artificially inseminated over and over, and their babies are taken away. So they're in emotional distress. They're in physical distress, and they often get infections or sicknesses. And one of those is mastitis. And mastitis is a terrible infection of the udder, where the udder can swell. There can be open sores. Very painful to be milked. She's in a lot of pain. And so the conventional dairy will offer her antibiotics or medications, pharmaceuticals to clear up the mastitis. In organic operations, the organic regulations, they don't allow for those antibiotics, the pharmaceuticals, and so she can linger in pain. And I had, when I was researching one of my books, I had a veterinarian confide in me that he was seeing cows in the most distress at milking and the most pain on their udders in organic dairy. So it really shows how even with these humane labels, these animals can suffer, and sometimes even more. So I encourage you to check out humanehoax.org. That's our website for the Humane Hoax Project. Very easy to remember, humanehoax.org. So just, I can't not talk about the animals. Had to bring that in. But what we want to talk about today is the Ahimsa Living Project. So this is a new project for compassionate living. And just a little background on me, I have been doing this work for over 30 years. I've been vegan for 34 years, and I've been working for national nonprofits in the vegan education sector, in the animal advocacy sector for many years. And during the pandemic, I started Compassionate Living to further the projects that I have been passionate about and that I have been thinking deeply about. And the Humane Hoax Project was one of them. The other is the Ahimsa Living Project. And this project is very near to my heart. Kojin and I have been married for 23 years, and he has been deeply in study of the Dharma traditions during that time. And I, of course, have been doing the vegan education. And now we're bringing these worlds together because they are so connected and so deeply connected. It's always been so amazing to me when Kojin will share with me, the philosophies, the Jain philosophy, Ahimsa, and, karma theory and all these things. And I'll be like, that's exactly already how I feel as a vegan. That's already the philosophy that I've created, as a vegan. And it's just segues and comes together so beautifully. So we're very excited about this project, and I am going to turn it over to Kojin. Sorry, I talked so much, but Kojin, please let us know further what our vision is. Let the people know further what our vision is for the Ahimsa Living Project.
Yeah, thanks, Hope. Yeah, I'm the strategic advisor. I've got a master's degree in Buddhist studies, a PhD in Hindu studies, and I'm an assistant professor in Jain studies at Arihanta Institute. So therefore, I have deep roots in all three of the main Dharmic traditions, Buddhism, Hinduism, and Jainism. And so Hope and I are reaching out to the communities of all of these different traditions, and including the modern yoga movement as well, too, to promote veganism, but also to uplift these traditions. And so this is sort of like a two-part sort of mission that we have, is to uplift these traditions by showing that these traditions do have solutions to address some of the major crises that face our world today, but also to promote veganism within those traditions. And the way we do that is by empowering the voices of vegans within those traditions, seeking out people in Buddhist, Hindu, and Jain traditions, and giving them a platform to start to help define how their tradition could be understood and how it can address the horrible issues of animal exploitation and animal agriculture. So this is really to underscore that veganism can be supported for those who do identify with Dharma tradition, traditions, but also a lot of people are curious about Dharma traditions. Maybe we might call them Dharma curious, who are vegans and want to know that the spiritual paths that they're interested in can support their veganism. And so that's just some of the sort of work that we're doing to create bridges within those communities and to create platforms where vegans increasingly have voices within that community. And one of the ways that we've envisioned doing this is with the progressive conferences. We have a Jain Vegan Conference, which is unique because the Jain movement already, the Jain tradition already has a very robust vegan and animal advocate movement, but that's not necessarily the case in Buddhist and Hindu traditions. So bring in the voice of veganism and animal advocacy into progressive politics and put progressive sort of strains within those traditions is one of the ways that we're going to do that. So I'll turn it back over to Hope to say more about the organization.
Well, and just a little bit more, if you want to go back to that slide, just a little more about this. I mean, there certainly are vegan voices within Hinduism and within Buddhism. We don't mean to say that there's not. There are wonderful organizations that are focused in there, but we have found that the Jains are just so open and embracing, and had such a huge love and openness to this, that we felt that we wanted to do this conference that we're in, the Jain Vegan Conference, or the Ahimsa Vegan Conference that's focused on Jainism. But the reason we felt that perhaps we want to do more of a broader progressive conference focused on in the Hindu communities, Buddhist communities, and then the yoga community as well, kind of Western yoga, is more because we could bring in other issues, reach out further, and people will come in that have progressive and more open ideas, and then we will have veganism weaved throughout, vegan panels and things like that. So they'll get introduced when there's this broader context of progressive. So that's kind of our idea about that, reaching more people with the vegan message on a broader scale, if that makes sense. So what we need, we are really looking at getting an advisory board together for the Ahimsa Living Project. So we're looking for advisory board members. I also would love to get a couple more board members on the Compassionate Living board. So we're definitely looking for people that might be interested in taking their advocacy to a level of leadership and being on possibly an advisory board or board. We also are looking for people to help us with graphics, promotion, social media, especially social media. That is where I know we need some assistance, that if anyone has those social media skills, we would love that help, and also fundraising. The only way that we're going to be able to fulfill our vision is through fundraising. And being able to take this into the future, being able to do conferences like this on a larger scale. The other project that I really am looking into, and we didn't make a slide for it, but I'd like to mention, is that I would really love to have a monthly gathering that furthers what we've done here, what we're doing here. A monthly online gathering, a meeting of maybe a couple hours where we get together and we really embrace these concepts. We have speakers, some of the speakers that we've had from this weekend. We take this further, take the connection with Ahimsa and veganism further. So if anyone is interested in that, in an online gathering, I would love to start that through Compassionate Living. So let me know if you're interested in helping with that. So that's something that we can certainly do very easily, and just start, gathering. So just if you have any questions beyond this conference, any questions that were unanswered or that come up after, you're certainly welcome to reach out to me, to us. Kojin has incredible knowledge about veganism and Jain philosophy, and I do with veganism as well. So you can get in touch with us. Certainly doesn't have to be to volunteer or anything like that. You can certainly just reach out and connect with us through Compassionate Living's website or my podcast website, which is the Hope for the Animals podcast. So, okay, thank you so much for your attention and time. And we're going to move into a Q&A session. So, Chris, have you gathered some questions from folks?
I certainly have, and thank you so much. I'm going to give you a round of applause. Thank you so much, Hope and Kojin. I'm sorry I forgot to mention your name there at the beginning, for a wonderful presentation. I actually have a copy of your book here, Hope, on my desk, The Humane Hoax. It's a great book if anyone wants to see some of the deep work that Hope as well as Kojin have been doing. We all have chapters in this wonderful book, The Humane Hoax. There's a Jain chapter in there actually too. So thank you all so much. And we do have a lot of great questions in the chat for everyone, really. So I can go through and just mention some of these. And I think we may even call in some of our other panelists who weren't in this particular panel to answer perhaps some of these questions. So the first question I have here is, it's really fascinating to listen to all these topics. Well, this is a comment, and I want to celebrate this comment. This is from Hina Parek. It says, I shall definitely do vegan Paryushan and remain vegan. So we applaud you for that, Hina, for having that insight and transformation through the event itself. And she thanks all of us for such an enlightening afternoon. Another person says this, and this is for the Jain Vegan Initiative. They may have answered this question already. I'm joining from Seattle. I'm not sure if there is any presence of Jain Vegan Initiative in the greater Seattle area. Would definitely love to be more involved if there's already a group here. So perhaps Sunny or Pratik or Nisha can address that question. I know that there are meetups, and you mentioned the meetups.
Yeah, absolutely. I can go ahead and take it. We actually do have a pretty large presence within the Seattle community. So there's obviously a large Jain Dharma there. And we also have a local WhatsApp group just for Jain Vegan meetups. And so we'd love for you to be a part of it. So we can post a link in the chat for that.
Great. Thanks so much. I always enjoy seeing on Jain Vegan Initiative's Instagram page, if you don't follow them, they have pictures from the meetups, as Sunny showed, from all over the world. So you can always see what's happening in your local place and be featured in one of those pictures. Thanks, Sunny. So there's another question from Keval Gala. It says, I've been vegan for almost 14 years now, but I only follow the Jain diet during Paryushan. Are there any health benefits to the Jain diet? So we're saying Jain diet here specifically from someone who's already vegan. No roots, no onions, no garlic, root vegetables and everything, etc. There was an earlier question about whether or not there had been research done on the Jain diet or the Jain vegan diet. So I don't know if Dr. Jinnah Shah, I guess Dr. Mehta, Tushar Mehta is gone, or any of the other medically inclined people would like to answer that question, or maybe there isn't an answer.
I'll also ask Asha. I'm not aware of any particular studies. Certainly there are people that have allium-based intestinal issues, so garlic and onions might create disturbances, and so avoiding those would be helpful. We know that in sort of yoga and Hindu traditions, they also talk about such items being rajasic, so there might be Ayurvedic reasons that one might want to avoid root vegetables, like there are some other Hindu and Buddhist traditions also that avoid them. But from a what we conventionally would consider evidence-based medicine perspective, I'm not really aware of research on that. Asha, how about you?
So yeah, it's a very tough question because we practice at our medical practice, the whole food plant-based. And there's been a lot of research that, the allium family is very helpful, or, for cancer, protection of cancer is a huge. So it's always been a struggle whenever we have patients who are Jain and they want to kind of follow. It is a very fine line. So that's where I can say that completely devoiding, completely off, because the root vegetables, they can be great calorie sources also. So that's where we come from. Yeah, there's been not proper, but completely devoiding is being tough for, I've been trying to look for that answer. I've not found. Yeah, and one thing that's my desire, a few years ago, I had given a talk in, this was in Mumbai, India. We were talking about cardiovascular disease. what I really saw based on my friends and families back in India, there's a lot of chronic health issues within the community that were very strict and were not eating the onion, garlic, or greens, or, so it was impacting their health. So I want to go deeper into that. I really want to kind of get the source behind this. Where did this come from? So that's where I can say I'll definitely be happy to share when I'll be ready. But there was so many cardiovascular disease and this was purely Jain. All the data that I had, it was in Mulland, they all had chronic illnesses. They all were Jain. They were following Jain, diet. So that's where there's a lot of chronic illnesses also. So we have to really dig deeper into that. Yeah, I can share. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the chronic illness among Indian Americans, including Jains, there has been studies on dairy.
Dairy is a big one.
Saturated fat, the high intake of dairy in the traditional Jain diet as being a huge contributing factor. And I've been interested, and I haven't figured out how to do it yet, in doing a study kind of comparing those who are whole foods plant-based. I think we've talked about it, Asha, versus, lacto-vegetarians, and really showing the changes in health outcomes. But in terms of the traditional Jain diet, I mean, I think the other thing is, there's some controversy as to whether that was a later instruction, and if that's really originally what the Jain diet is. And so what we might consider to be a conventional Jain diet, avoiding root vegetables, is not universally accepted as, what Jainism hasn't always prescribed.
Yeah. Just last thing, Gina, you brought a very good point. When I was doing this presentation back in Mumbai, this was the question that had come up was, truly, was it only, because during monsoon season, it is tough because you are going to disturb so many, lives, as Ruchika said, the different kind of lives during. And that may be the good reasons, to kind of really minimize the ahiṃsā during that time. So yeah, that was a discussion that I remember, that did come up. That was it more with the environment, in respect to the environment more.
Thank you both. And I really think we're so lucky to have within the Jain community so many different experts in so many different expert areas, including in these medical areas and nutritional areas. So thank you both for providing those answers. Pivoting to a different topic that has been discussed in this conference as well as by Hope Bohanec. There's this question about why were cows in organic dairies more stress and or harm than cows in conventional dairies? That's coming from Maynard Clark. I believe, Hope, that you had spoken about that. Why organic dairies are more stressful for the animals than conventional dairies. It's a good question that's worth reiterating.
Yeah, like I was saying, the organic regulations, the organic standards don't allow for the farmers to give cows antibiotics, pharmaceuticals, medications that help them to relieve suffering through illness. They are often sick in these very intensive farming situations. They're stressed. They get illnesses and infections, and there's a high use of, and that's why the farming sector uses the most antibiotics in the U.S. Because they're giving them to these stressed and sick animals. But when a farm goes organic, when they're using the organic regulations and standards, they're not able to give them those medications, and so the cows can suffer even more. The infections go untreated. And like with mastitis, the udder can be so painful at milking, and open sores, pus, blood. It's awful. So it's just an example of why when we see these labels, like organic and certified humane, they may not be what the industry is wanting you to believe something that's not true. Most people think, well, it must be a little better, at least a little better. in some instances, it can be even worse. And that's, an example. Organic dairy is a good example of that. So, Nirva, did you want to say something?
Yeah, do you mind if I just jump in? I'm not a physician, but I did a report on pain medications in farm animals. And it's amazing that even whether it's organic or not organic, there's not a single pain medication that is approved for farm animals in this country. There is a drug that has proven results that is used in the UK, and it's called Medicam or meloxicam, and that is being used in the UK. And the studies that the UK used to justify the use of meloxicam in factory farms were done in the United States. And they showed that the residue of that drug actually dissipates. It's gone after a certain period of time, so the milk is clean afterwards. So meloxicam is something that really should be introduced. I mean, because the animals are not just suffering pain from birthing, but they're suffering pain from castration, from dehorning, from so many of these procedures that are part of animal agriculture, and they just silently suffer. And you can use these drugs off-label at the discretion of the veterinarian, but how many times that happens, when it happens, we really don't know. And meloxicam, this is the last thing I'm going to say, meloxicam is approved for use in this country for dogs and cats.
Thank you, Nirva. Yeah. Okay, so did anyone else want to respond to that? There are some more questions I have here. This is a good question that often comes up about how we describe what we do within what we're talking about here in terms of animal advocacy and veganism. It's from Bhupen Mehta, who says, we should discuss the use and connotation of the word vegan versus plant-based, Jain lifestyle, whole food, etc. What is the better quote unquote word for the Jain community and the world at large? This is a question, I think it's a philosophical question as well as a practical question in terms of which word do we use to describe what it is that we're doing. And it's fine if others who are not on the panel want to chime in here, who are here, but vegan versus plant-based. What have you to say about this? Does anybody have anything to say about this?
I feel like internally in the Jain community, we can say vegan. It's a whole lifestyle. It's not just a diet. It's values-based. But I think for others, I think the reason that plant-based came to be used is because others have an aversion to the word, and it has provoked kind of a knee-jerk reaction that's prevented them from even taking incremental or reducitarian steps. And so, for example, what I've noticed in whole foods plant-based being used in a medical setting is that it takes the ethical connotation away, and it makes patients more able to hear what a lifestyle coach or a healthcare provider, a doctor is willing to say. And I've seen at some of these lifestyle medicine conferences, when I've spoken personally with Dr. Greger, Dr. Clapper, others in the movement, they're very careful to not want to sound like they're biasing their medical recommendations with ethical reasons to eat plant-based. So it really depends. Like I think is embedded in the question, I think it depends on the purpose of the communication, the person speaking, and the audience. And you have to choose what fits the purpose of the communication. But for me, when I speak with Jains, I feel like I want to say there's a real ethical basis to what we want to do. Yes, there's health benefits. Yes, there's environmental benefits, but I want to say vegan because I feel it expresses more fully what we're talking about.
Yeah, I'll just add, Gina, that was perfect. Absolutely, exactly. Well said. And I think it's good to remember that plant-based doesn't necessarily mean vegan. That the whole food plant-based diet can have some animal products in it, and often does. So just keeping that in mind, that vegan is something different. So plant-based diet is really around health, and it's important, and we want to eat whole food plant-based. But vegan takes it further into the ethics and into the animals, the planetary destruction, climate change, all of those things are included in vegan. And that's why I feel it's very important that we do embrace this term, that we do use this term, because it has a more ethical and weighty meaning.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it also, when we say vegan, and you tend to see this in the movement, that people tend to extend it not just to what they're eating, but to everything that they're doing, right? And so whole food plant-based is a part of vegan, just like vegan is a part of the Jain tradition in some way, right? Great. Does
Yeah.
anybody else want to respond to that? Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to add, it's absolutely true. And I remember in Pratik's presentation yesterday, he was talking about insect life and the ants, and he had this wonderful image of ants who I think are really cute, honestly. I love seeing pictures of ants. And it's very true. As vegans, you know, we are really looking to expand beyond just the shopping list, beyond just the meat, dairy, and eggs, avoiding meat, dairy, and eggs. And that goes into ahiṃsā, right? It just lends itself right into that nonviolence and living a nonviolent life. So, you know, that once you're, it's funny because you go vegan and you're avoiding dairy and you're doing it for health, and then suddenly you're not killing the ants in the kitchen and you're being careful about getting spiders out of your house. You know, so it's this beautiful kind of evolution into nonviolence that lends itself so well to ahiṃsā. So, yeah.
Thanks, Hope. Okay. So moving on to the next question. Here's a question from Sydney Jain. I think this is Sydney Jain from Chicago, who also gave a wonderful talk yesterday about the harms of dairy at the Chicago Center that I was very lucky to see on video. Here's the question. As I said, there's so much vegan stuff going on this weekend in the Jain community. It's wonderful. B12 is essential for us, but it cannot be obtained from vegan food. One argument I hear from my non-vegan friends is that human beings naturally need animal sources of food in order to obtain B12. The fact that B12 supplements are necessary make a vegan diet unnatural. You know, this is what friends think. What are some good ways to counter this argument? So I know we've talked about B12 and supplements like this, but I think this is an important nutritional question that comes up a lot. So I don't know if, again, Asha or Gina wanted to respond to that, but please.
I think it's a philosophical question, because like, what is natural? You know, I mean, who's going to be able to claim a natural diet? And I think this is sort of part of the fallacy that gets people moving towards like this paleo direction. That we're going to sort of like glorify these Neanderthals who lived to 30 years old because they're more natural, or people reject agriculture because agriculture is not natural, right? So it's very, very hard to even interrogate what the word natural means in that type of context, because anybody who's criticizing veganism for not being natural for supplementation would have a very, very hard time showing that their diet is natural.
Great point.
I can just add, you know, because, you know, we are on a regenerative farm. And one of the things that I've learned that the way our soil, you know, like our food, when our patients, and this is just, you know, when we don't know, there needs to be a lot of research done, but what Dr. Bryce suggests, when we eat from a regenerative farm, which is farmed very mindfully, and, you know, trying to keep all the microorganisms and keeping all of that, and just dusting off the soil off, a lot of that time there are microorganisms on those, and they are beneficial for our body. So it's a very mixed, you know, like, our soils are very depleted. We were designed to work in those environments. We were designed to be digging our hands into those soils, but we just have moved away. So I just kind of, you know, there's always discussion coming up about, you know, why do we have to be taking supplementing of B12? But it's just that it's hard to get it any other way. Yeah. So this is just a thought that I wanted to share.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Dr. Bohanec said, and also what Asha is saying. And as I mentioned, older people who cannot absorb B12 as well, they may need injections. Even folks that eat dairy and other animal products may need to supplement. It's not like just unique to vegans. And I've heard Dr. Clapper, who I was fortunate enough to work with for a bit, also say that basically our whole world is unnatural at this point. Like there is no like natural diet. So let's not invoke that as a reason to not hurt animals.
Combining.
You could also natural is not necessarily better, because the natural procreation of humans is that most children die at childbirth, and most women would die of childbirth. I mean, if we wanted to be natural, that's how we managed to keep our population in check until the modern scientific revolution. So natural is not necessarily better, because in some ways nature actually wants you dead. So I mean, there's something to be said for that. And just because something happens in nature doesn't mean we should do it, right? So for example, if we look at like procreation amongst animals, which is often forcible, just because that's natural doesn't mean we should do it. So that invokes a naturalistic fallacy. Because something is a certain way doesn't mean that's how we should behave.
I think sometimes we run into these kinds of issues when people bring in terms like natural, or there's also something coming in the Q&A about rights, and do insects have rights? So just realize these are not concepts that you get in Jainism, right? Jainism doesn't say do the natural thing. It says do least harm. It doesn't say animals have rights. It says we as human beings have the choice to do the least amount of harm possible to promote wellness among all. So when you try to reconcile some of these concepts, it leads to some contortions and difficulties. Let's bring it back to the Jain fundamentals, which, I think that really provide a better foundation by which we can view our relationship with the world.
Yeah, there's natural antagonism between rights and duties, right? People don't want to do their duties to society because it infringes on their rights. And the more we sort of brandish our rights and our entitlements, the less we're more likely to do our ethical duties. And so in some ways, discourse about rights can actually be very much against ethical duties. So there can be an antagonistic tension there as well, too. But then, of course, rights are also a good foundation to respect the inherent worth of a being, which, if that's what rights are, the inherent intrinsic worth, then I think then it could be at least somewhat compatible with Jain tradition.
Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you all. So that was Sydney Jain who posed that question from the Chicago Center. And Sydney left another comment there saying that they should have clarified from an evolution standpoint that the argument of non-vegans is that we evolved to need animal food. And I think we've kind of covered that in this conversation, that that's also, and Sydney knows that argument is fundamentally flawed, right? So thank you, Sydney, and congratulations on the wonderful event you all had in the Chicago Center this same weekend. Another
additional point to that, Chris, sorry, really quickly.
Absolutely, no.
Because I understand that argument, and I get that argument a lot, especially non-Jains who are omnivorous, right? They'll say that we evolved to be omnivorous. So we have these like tiny little canines and they're useful, and shouldn't we continue that because it's natural? And I think what's important is that being omnivorous was useful at some point in our evolution for survival, because it allowed us to be opportunistic eaters. Right, so we could survive in extreme conditions, and we were able to, even though I would argue we're not biologically omnivorous, we were able to process that and survive. There's also some evidence that potatoes helped our evolution, so it wasn't just animal products that we relied on. But at this point, I think the argument is like null, because we don't need to anymore, and that's really the question we should be asking. So if can we evolve further beyond just our physiology, to evolve to do things that don't damage our bodies, don't damage the environment, as we've seen? and certainly don't damage the animals. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Nisha. It's a great point.
I might also add that it's kind of irrelevant how we evolved. What matters is what we do that makes us the most healthy. You know, so arguing about what happened in the past, really, like, of what relevance is that when we're discussing what's the most healthy option, most environmental option, and what respects life on the planet.
Okay, wonderful. There's a question coming in. I believe it's from Alexa Weaver, and I believe that's Alex in Florida, if I'm not mistaken. And if that is Alex from Florida, we send our greetings to Jesse as well. The question is, any tips on finding primary care doctors who share these ethics and understand health through a vegan lens? Really good question. Really in all facets of life is when you're a vegan and you reach out for some kind of care, mental health, physical care, and all these things, are there resources and places where you can find people, medical doctors, for example, who can work with you and understand these needs? Does anybody have any comments on that besides watching Dr. Greger's wonderful videos online?
There may be something in this person's local area that I'm not aware of. And I don't know what to suggest specifically for Florida. I think there is, maybe Asha's aware, there's a similar, a center promoting a whole foods plant-based lifestyle in Florida. Did you want to say anything about that?
I think, you know, that when you search in plant-based doctors, I feel that they definitely are very close to, you know, the philosophies of vegan, and, you know, they are pretty good. So I would start from that, plant-based doctors. I know, I'm trying to think, I think it was called plantbaseddoctors.com or something, because they do telehealth also.
There's plant-based, yeah, there's definitely plant-based telehealth that yeah. You can plant-based telehealth, and
that
there
is
will be
another way, the avenue to do. You know, a very close friend of ours is actually running that telehealth. It's I forget the name. I'll try to share it with Christopher later. But yeah, that would be a good resource, the telehealth. And if you're in New Jersey, we welcome you at Ethos.
And there's certainly many resources. Nirva has recommended a book that I also recommend. I interviewed Dr. Reshma Shah's book Nourish, which is really helpful for families. So really focusing on children and families. So there's, it depends on kind of what you're looking for, but go ahead, Asha.
I always, when it comes to children, you know, this is a very dear, Dr. Furman's Disease Proof Your Child. He was my primary care doctor. He was the one who changed us. 1995 is when I met him. If you ever get hold of his book, Disease Proof Your Child, I found it extremely valuable in raising my own two ones. So just wanted to kind of bring that for children, especially if you want to raise children.
And there's a website called plantrition.org, which has a whole database of plant-based doctors. There's also Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, and I found a cardiologist through that who is a you know what they say about cardiologists, there's two types, there's the vegans and the ones that haven't read the data. So I understand the need and the importance for choosing a plant-based doctor.
And the name of the center in Florida is Hippocrates. So you may want to look that up in case that's near you in Florida, Hippocrates.
There's also a talk on YouTube by Dr. Priya Naik about how to talk to your doctor, because I know like a lot of people probably don't know a doctor who is vegan in their area. So how to talk to your doctor about going vegan. So that's available on YouTube. I think it was in the Atlanta Veg Fest or something. That's what the talk was.
And then to Nisha's point, the Plantrition Project will list lifestyle medicine doctors. So like this field of lifestyle medicine is increasingly accepting the data, and people should be familiar with the health benefits of whole foods vegan diets. Sorry, Parvinji.
A quick Google search, I came up with Dr. Christina Cherian in St. Petersburg. She is a general physician who is passionate about lifestyle medicine and evidence-based nutrition. So I think Google search like that could help us.
Yep, and maybe to end on a light note in that regard with what Parveen is talking about and using technology, one of the questions came through from Maynard about using AI to get answers to questions about veganism. And I know that the Jain Vegan Initiative and Sunny Jain recently asked AI some questions about veganism, and I didn't know if they wanted to comment on some of the really kind of entertaining and very good responses they received in that regard, which I know are on their Instagram page. Sunny, did you want to say anything about that, or Pratik or Anisha?
Yeah, absolutely. I can go ahead and share something about that. And so when ChatGPT first was a phenomenon that not a lot of people knew about, we thought it would be interesting if we asked ChatGPT if Jain should go vegan. And so we essentially asked two questions. The first question is, why shouldn't Jains go vegan? So we played devil's advocate. Let's figure out why Jains should not go vegan according to AI. And the answer was, and just very short, too long, to read, is there is no specific reason why Jains should not go vegan. Some Jains may choose not to follow a vegan diet for various reasons. However, it is important for Jains to consider the principle of nonviolence and ahiṃsā when making dietary choices. And that was kind of the theme of that answer, and which was very interesting. So the AI was not able to give a legitimate reason why Jains should not go vegan. And then we asked the question, why should Jains go vegan? And the answer was Jains follow the principles of nonviolence and ahiṃsā, which dictate they should not cause harm to any living beings. By adopting a vegan diet, Jains can ensure they are not contributing to the exploitation or suffering of animals. Additionally, a vegan diet aligns with the Jain philosophy of minimizing harm and reducing the impact on the environment. And so essentially, AI was fully on the side of why Jain should go vegan. Quite an entertaining kind of post that we created, but it was really just to show that just AI compilating all the information that exists on the internet, that this was the answer they came up with.
Yep.
Thank you for sharing that, Sunny. I think it's a lighthearted way to end, and I recommend people go look at that post because I really thought it was wonderful. If it's okay with everyone, we're coming to the end of time, but I did want to hand it over to our president, co-founder, CEO, Parveen Jain, to say some last words here.
Last words. I think the last words have to be thank you very much, everybody, for 2 great days of discussions. I attended every moment of it, learned a lot, particularly some of the speakers like Ruchika, and yesterday also some speakers talk about from personal experiences as to how they got into veganism and how they are promoting it, how they have lived it. It's a learning process. I myself became vegan about 3 years ago, and every day that I passes, I endorse that decision that that's the right step I did 2 years ago. Wish I had done that 20, 30, 40 years ago, but it takes some time for the tube light to light up. So no, thank you very much for 2 days of very educational, I should say, learning experiences. Thank you very much. And this is what Arihanta Institute is all about. I don't want to plug too much about Arihanta Institute, but I want to say that one of the objectives we have is to bring people together, share their experiences as to how they are living Jain way of life. And then from there, we can have others learn from it and learn how to live the same lifestyle. So thank you very much, everybody. Really appreciate that.
Wonderful. And so with that, we're on the hour. Thank you so much, Parveen, and thank you to our collaborators at Jain Vegan Initiative, Compassionate Living, Jaina's Ahiṃsā Eco-Vegan Committee, and all of those who organize and help and contribute to this event. And stay tuned. We will send out an email with the recordings and a follow-up and a survey after this. You'll see that in the coming week. And we really do look forward to your feedback and to hearing from you. Please reach out to the individuals you heard speak. And thank you all, speakers and crowd audience, for a wonderful time. Jai Jinendra.